Monday edition of the Sports Bash. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on 97.3 ESPN alongside Hunter Brody. He's on the left side of your screen. I'm on the right. If you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, is where you can watch 97.3 ESPN live shows on the stream. Of course, we are live on your radio for the Matt Black Kia Studios on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. As of right now, no Carson Wentz trades yet, Broads. But it seems like the news hasn't changed that much. But you know who might make a trade soon? Philadelphia 76ers. So who makes a trade first? I asked the question on the weekend. I'm going to ask it again. Is Daryl Morey going to beat Howie to the punch again? Like, come on.
I think it's very possible. I really do. It does seem like the Eagles are going to be patient with this, which I don't hate, but at the same time, my fandom in me wants it to be over just because, you know, I'm sick and tired of waking up every day and the first thing I think about is, hey, let's hop on Twitter to see if anything happened when I was sleeping or when I was working or whatever the case may be. So, yeah, it's getting annoying, but I understand the process.
So coming up on the show, we will have Inside the Sixers with Paul Hudrick at 3:20. George Hill, DeLon Wright, some names floating around out there. I know when I've talked to the guys over the last few days, you know, they basically said, they're like, hey, you know, we wrote this article with 9 names, but we got more names to add to it. So we'll see what's going on the latest with Paul Hudrick coming up at 3:20 today. Also football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Geoff Mosher will join us. I know Geoff's got some very poignant things to say about the Eagles situation moving forward. We'll get into that with him. I also got some audio. For those who didn't hear, Jeff Darlington was on Greeny this morning talking about the Wentz situation. And, of course, your text messages, 609-403-0973. Your comments on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can drop a comment on below the show here as you watch us here on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter on 97.3 ESPN. So, obviously, we can't avoid the Wentz stuff, right? And I started doing this on my show on Saturday, and I feel like you're kind of in the same boat. You can only rehash the same thing so many times, right? So are we at the point now we need to start talking about the actuality and what happens afterward moving forward? Because I think it's just as interesting as what the Eagles do once the trade is done as much as it is trading Wentz.
It's a great point. It's pretty interesting. We now have a new head coach in Philadelphia. A new head coach in Philadelphia. When was the last time you heard someone actually question what is... maybe it has to do with, just to be fair, we don't know. We don't know anything about him. If you had someone in here who had veteran experience and has a track record, maybe the conversation's different because you have something to base it off of. So it is wild to think that here's a new head coach in Philadelphia, a new head coach for the Eagles, and it's not being discussed, but it does make sense at the same time because what can you say? You don't know what he is going to do.
Well, 3 of the last 4 coaches you can say that about. Sirianni, Peterson, and Andy Reid. Nobody really knew what to expect from those guys when they came in. The only guy you really knew was Chip Kelly. And, well, we saw how that turned out.
Yeah, you knew what he was about, but still, at the NFL level, you can make the argument that you didn't know how it would translate or relate. But in terms of conversation, you're right. You saw what he ran in Oregon, and you knew that he would try and implement that in today's game of the NFL. So you had an idea of how he would play things, definitely.
So to me, again, I'm working under the assumption that Wentz is getting traded. I know there are some people out there who are trying to put out there the scenarios of him maybe coming back, which I'm sorry. I'm kind of in the boat where I'm with Sal Palantonio. The toothpaste is out of the tube, right? That's kind of where I'm at. I think that it would be shocking if he's back here next year just because of the way things have gone. And, you know, the verbiage from guys like Mosher and Kaplan on the Inside the Birds podcast, the verbiage from Adam Schefter, who covers the entire NFL, the verbiage from guys on NFL Network, the verbiage tells me that Wentz is on his way out the door. I just don't have a specific date it's going to happen, but I feel like it's going to happen. And I think that we need to start accepting that, even though there's a handful of people who don't want to accept it, maybe.
No, I understand what you're saying, but just because it is going down this road, you said you'd be shocked.
Yes.
Well, guess what? This franchise has shocked me a lot lately. Drafting Jalen Hurts. I remember I couldn't even talk for 6 minutes. What the hell is going on here? Shocked is what this franchise does to me as of late. So I understand why because it seems inevitable. It seems obvious he's going to be out of town. But I don't think that we should pretend like this could go wrong. We do need to prepare ourselves for maybe the craziest scenario possible, which is he does come back to a very uncomfortable spot. Do I think that there's a great chance that this happens? Absolutely not. I really don't. But it does need to be an option just because this has been absurd. All of this. So we need to keep absurd content here because I'm basing it off of the track record of the recent years.
This was Jeff Darlington this morning on ESPN Radio about the timetable for Wentz being traded.
So for me, when it comes to Wentz, I just don't think if they're expecting to get the same amount of compensation that that's going to happen. That being said, I do think it eventually gets done. And to lay out the timeline here, March 19th is the deadline for them to have to pay Wentz $10 million of an offseason bonus. It's got to happen before March 19th.
He's referring to the Stafford compensation in the deal. But March 19th. So we could be in the middle of March Madness and the Eagles drop a trade on us.
In the middle of Loyola of Chicago in the third quarter? How dare they?
That might happen. Might be. Listen, you know how it works. You know, the Eagles, they're in their own little world, man. We've talked about that before.
Right. Well, they would probably plan it. They'd look for, okay, when does Duke play UNC? Let's drop it right in the middle of that.
Well, it's a shame they won't be in the tournament.
Yeah, you're right, because they both stink. But, yeah, as if that would be a distraction to Philadelphia Eagles. Hold on Carson Wentz news.
Villanova.
Yeah.
What's the Villanova game?
Yeah, as if that would distract us, really, of the big news. That's a good pull by you, right? No doubt about it.
Nova's playing at 4:25, and the Eagles dropping at 4:35. No one's going to pay attention.
A 1-16 matchup, too. Not even a good one where they wait till it gets really juicy.
Oh, did you see the latest projections from the committee? Nova's not even a 1 seed. In the committee's first release of their top fours in each
I
region.
wonder if that's only because sample size wise, because they didn't play for weeks. Now, I'm not saying that's fair.
Well, the Creighton loss probably doesn't help.
Yeah, for sure.
But they showed the rankings yesterday because I flipped on a little bit of the Michigan game yesterday just to see what they look like because they were another team that didn't play much in the last few weeks. And they showed on the screen, the committee, and I'm looking at them like, wow, Villanova's not even a 1 seed. Ugh. Wow. I don't think that's
I disrespect them, that's all.
Well, 2-15 still. Maybe someone's got some extra money on the game. And the Eagles say, halftime, we'll make the deal. Why not?
Unbelievable. It really is.
But that's how this team works.
for sure.
This team doesn't care what's going on in the rest of the world. They're in their own little world.
Well, no, they would try and use it. They would try and plan it strategically as
manipulate the situation.
Yeah, exactly. But, come on. We're not stupid here, people. We understand. Howie, we know what you're doing.
But I think the March 19th date is interesting. It's something that Kaplan brought up to us on Friday on Football on 4, and I want to bring it up again is because I think people they got so suckered into the whole it's coming days, it's coming soon, that maybe there were other variables go into this that we didn't realize. It's becoming more and more apparent that the Colts were the team that offered the 2 second-round picks. And I have to wonder if there is another NFL team out there that says we offered a better deal, as the report said out there, maybe that team's not Chicago, because Chicago seems to be becoming less and less interested potentially in the situation. So maybe it is Denver. Maybe it is another team that is out there scratching the wall, because I came up with a list over the weekend. You know me on my list. I write things down.
So do I.
You and I, guys.
I got my notebook. No doubt about it.
I thought about this because somebody asked a question. It was a great question on the YouTube stream on Saturday, on Sports Bash Saturday. And they said, how many guys are really ahead of Wentz among the available quarterbacks? I thought it's a great question because context is king. Context will tell you where Wentz is going. So just a general list before I give you my ranking. For everybody out there, think about this for a minute. Here are all the quarterbacks who are available this offseason. Let's first start with the rookies. You got Trevor Lawrence, you got Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones, Trey Lance. We expect there to be 5 quarterbacks drafted in the first round. So you got to throw those 5 quarterbacks into the availability conversation. Then, of the quarterbacks who are in the NFL currently, you have Carson Wentz, you have Sam Darnold, you have Matt Ryan, Jimmy Garoppolo, Mitch Trubisky's a free agent, Ryan Fitzpatrick is a free agent. So there's a good amount of dudes out there, right? I think it's fair to admit. And I'm working under the assuming that Jameis Winston is staying in New Orleans. Is that fair?
Yeah. And even if he wasn't, I think he's somewhat irrelevant to this.
And I'm not putting Newton on this list because even though I think Cam still got something left in the tank, I'm trying to look at this objectively from NFL teams' perspective. I think there's a lot of NFL teams who won't give Cam a shot. But that's just me, my personal opinion.
I would agree with you. I don't think that there's many people running out to go try and sign Cam Newton. And if he does go somewhere, it's going to be for a very small amount of money for 1 year. So I would agree with you.
The other caveat is I don't expect Russell Wilson to be traded, and I don't expect Aaron Rodgers to be traded. So I'm removing all of the what-if variables so we can just keep it to this list. So this list is, where does Carson Wentz rank among the available quarterbacks this offseason in terms of who wants it, like who's more desirable, okay? My number one quarterback is Trevor Lawrence. I think every NFL team, if they get their hands on Trevor, unless they have like an elite quarterback already, they want Trevor Lawrence. Is that fair?
Yes.
I think the second guy on the list has to be Deshaun Watson. And the only reason why he's second is because it probably would take a lot to get him, right? It probably takes a lot to get him out of Houston. Like probably more than the Stafford package. Like I've heard 3 first-round picks.
And you know what? If I'm a franchise to get someone like Deshaun Watson, I'm giving up 3 first-round picks.
My third guy who I think is most valuable or is most wanted is Justin Fields. And the only reason why I have Fields ahead of Wilson is because I think that more teams like Fields. I think the reason why Wilson might go higher in the draft because there are certain teams ahead in the picks. Like, for example, there's rumors that the Jets want to trade Darnold and then draft Wilson. That's a personal preference. It's not saying that everybody wants Wilson more than Fields. I think the general NFL population thinks Justin Fields is like Lawrence is a 1A, Fields is a 1B kind of thing.
How much of that is where they played, right? I mean, the
Part
schools, the schools that they played at gives you a little bit of bias towards it. I'm not saying that for the good or for the bad. I'm saying in general, when someone looks at a 1B instead of the 1A and they do look at Justin Fields, how much of that is, look, this kid played at Ohio State compared to a BYU team.
Right. Then I have Matt Ryan. And the reason why I have Matt Ryan next is because he's got the resume, right? If you're a team that's like you're the Washington football team, or you're the New England Patriots, or you're the San Francisco 49ers, you're a win-now team in win-now mode concept. You want a win-now quarterback, right?
I would agree with you.
Then I have Zach Wilson as the next guy on the list, only because I know how much teams love him, but the rap on him is the injury issues. You think Carson Wentz has injury issues?
It's a hell of a combination.
I know, right? You think Carson Wentz has injury issues? Zach Wilson's got some weird injury history, and he hasn't even been in the NFL yet. So then after Wilson, because that's my 1 through 5 right there. I have Lawrence, Watson, Fields, Ryan, Wilson. Any complaints or issues?
No, I'll wait until we finish the list to give you my assessment.
Okay. My number 6 is Sam Darnold, only because of the contract. I think the contract has a lot to do with this as well. He has a very friendly contract. There's not a lot of money there to work with. Then I have Wentz. I have Darnold ahead of Wentz because of the contract.
Okay, so skill level-wise, you would say that Carson Wentz has the better upside than the Sam Darnold?
In theory, yes.
Okay.
But I think
it's
in
financial
terms of
decision.
I think in terms of NFL other teams' desirability, they would like to have the contract over anything else. Because then at least with the contract, it's something to work with. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I do think it's situational, kind of like how you mentioned Matt Ryan, where it depends on the situation. It's not just going to be any team. I would say the same with that contract. But would that make Sam Darnold's trade value more if you're the Jets? Is if you're going to have you're going to have to pay a steeper price to get that cap-friendly deal.
Because that's my working theory is it's going to take basically selling the farm to get Deshaun Watson. It's going to take a good amount to get Matt Ryan. It's going to take a good amount to get Darnold, and maybe Wentz is like right below both of those guys.
The only problem I have with the list is it's hard for me to mix the draft guys with the actual players because, there might be someone in play that doesn't have a high first-round pick that might not package their stuff together to go up to 6. Let's just say hypothetically a team's at 21, the Colts or whatever. Maybe to trade picks to go get Wentz to them is different than, hey, what can we do to move up from 21 to 6? If they balance that out, okay, what would it take to go from 21 to 6 to get Fields compared to giving up a couple picks to get Carson Wentz? You know what I mean? I do feel like it's a different conversation from internal standpoint of a franchise making that move depending on how you value these quarterbacks.
Well, my other thing is these quarterbacks also come with inexpensively and a lot of control. You basically get these guys for 5 years on a very cost-effective number compared to Wentz.
But how much, like the Rams, for example, this is their mentality. I'll give up all my draft picks in the world to go get a proven guy. Now, Carson Wentz, because of how bad last year is, he's not a proven guy. But if you're another organization, do you take the risk of drafting someone like a Wilson where you really don't know what you're going to get? With Wentz, I get it. You don't know what you're going to get, but I think you have a little bit more of an NFL resume to dive into to see that, okay, he has thrived at an elite level in this league already. Do I value at least seeing that before rather than going out and getting someone who's intriguing, but you don't know how his game's going to relate?
Yeah, and I think that, again, I'm looking at it from what is a team willing to give up for said player? You know, and how if they were willing to be doing it. Like, I think that a team is much more interested. Like, if you had to take Matt Ryan or Sam Darnold, you would take a Matt Ryan, right? Like, I think that's a pretty easy thing. That's why I have the other quarterbacks below Wentz.
Well, I guess it does depend who, right? If you're a team, I don't know. I'm just trying to think. I feel Matt Ryan is the perfect. You got to have like a playoff team right now and then get Matt Ryan, and that would really help you.
Right.
Would a team that isn't really competitive right now bring in Matt Ryan for a purpose other than maybe veteran leadership in the locker room?
Well,
kind
most of the teams who need a quarterback are in win-now mode. Because you think about San Francisco potentially getting rid of Jimmy Garoppolo. That's one. You have Chicago. They need to win now. That's 2. Colts win now. 3. Washington football team. They just won the division. They're basically a quarterback away from being legitimate, right?
Yeah, because their defense is special.
Right. The Patriots, you know, they got to fix their quarterback situation desperately.
I think they need more help than just that. I think that's a team that is, you mentioned in win-now mode, and I think we're just so used to that because it's the Patriots. But I think they need to have a serious discussion on what's next because they have a lot of holes.
I just don't think Belichick's interested in a rebuild.
Oh, I would agree with you on that. But at some point, you have to. It has to happen. At some point, as great as you've been, no organization just goes on forever. There needs to be that retool, part of you.
I just think the Patriots trying to push it down the lane as far as possible because, it's Belichick. He's like 60-something years old at this point. You know what I mean?
Definitely. But I just wanted to touch with Sam Darnold, for example. If you're a team that's ready to win right now, does bringing in Sam Darnold make as much sense as the Matt Ryan compared to Sam Darnold going to a team that is younger and they have more of a 3-year window to grow and groom? And that's why I think it's so situational based on the team.
Well, that's why, for example, a lot of people are throwing out there the idea that the Jets could go get Deshaun Watson and then include Darnold in the trade because then Houston gets a quarterback they can rebuild with is the working theory out there. I don't know how legitimate that is, only because we know Houston is not taking any calls. That's the thing that people keep forgetting. Houston keeps saying, we're not taking calls, but we know Watson was out of town, so we kind of have to keep Watson in the marketplace, but we know that getting him is not going to be easy.
Billy brought something interesting up on Sunday's show in the locker room about J.J. Watt being released compared to Deshaun Watson, and maybe I'm missing something, but they just released. He went in there and said, I want to be released, and he gets released. But Deshaun Watson, they're holding him hostage. With J.J. Watt, and clearly I understand the package that you get for Deshaun Watson, of course, but wouldn't there be someone that would be interested in trading for J.J. Watt where they could at least get something in return, or am I missing something here with the J.J. Watt release?
Well, I think that it's one of those deals where, and this is just me reading what they said, it seems like they view Watt as no longer part of the team's long-term plans.
But wouldn't you think that, okay, put him on the market, teams would trade, even if it's not a significant package, getting something in return has to be better than releasing him.
Well, we know that franchise is stupid anyway. So.
That is a very fair point.
I mean, the owner, Cal McNair, got up after the release of Watt, and when he was asked a question about Deshaun Watson, he says, we're not here to talk about that today. Like, dude, what do you think people are going to ask you about?
Exactly.
About what are you getting for lunch today? Come on, man. Like, that whole Houston situation is the stupidest situation in all of football to me. I don't get it. I don't understand it. I think the owner is oblivious. I think this Jack Easterby is turning into like this, like, he's like a puppet master. He's like moving things behind the scenes. Everyone's quitting or being fired. I mean, one guy had been in the organization for almost 20 years. He's like, I can't work with this guy. I quit. Like,
there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
Which is brutal.
It's so strange. So I feel like that. I know people like Billy asked the question, why would they release Watt but not want to trade Watson? I think it's clear as this. The organization thinks that Deshaun Watson's their franchise quarterback, and they don't want to let him go.
Well, they're oblivious then. Because,
they are oblivious.
Here's the thing, though. If you're Watson, what is your alternative? Not show up? Get fined? What do you do if that's the case? If they're not going to trade you and you are that pissed off, what can you really do?
That's the only thing you can do.
Is hold out, take the fines, huh?
Well, the other thing is that, remember, he has more guaranteed money than most players do on that contract. So the thing that makes the contract tradable also makes him okay if he wanted to sit out, because the amount of money that he's guaranteed apparently exceeds the amount of money he'd be fined.
Yeah, that's true.
So read into that what you will.
Now, you mentioned Trevor Lawrence, right? And saying how every organization wants their hands on him. This is just a fun hypothetical. It's not anything, legitimate, I would imagine. But if you are the Jags and you can get the proven player in Deshaun Watson, would you make that trade? Just hypothetically, first overall pick for Trevor Lawrence for Deshaun Watson. Would you do that trade?
Would I do it personally?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I would too.
Would Houston? Absolutely not, because you're in my division.
Oh, yeah, that's absolutely another
Jacksonville
element
and Houston are in the same exact division. So I'm going to assume that Houston would tell them to take a long walk on a short pier.
Yeah, but if I'm the Jags, and obviously this is like barroom conversation, proven commodity. And it's not even like it's a proven commodity that's just good. I mean, you're talking about Deshaun Watson. The thing that would be horrendous, though, is if you make that move and 4 years down the road, Trevor Lawrence becomes that next insane stud. But keep in mind, it could definitely be one of those things where both quarterbacks end up being great and helping both franchises, where you could look at it and say, well, both teams won the trade.
Again, I just don't see that happening.
Of course. I know it's not.
I appreciate the thought outside the box, though.
No,
it's a good outside the box
It's
thought.
definitely not happening.
Really quick, my quarterbacks below Wentz on my list. I think more teams would want Wentz than Jimmy G, more than Trubisky, and more than Ryan Fitzpatrick.
I also think for that list, I think people would rather have Wentz than Wilson. I really do. But you're going financial, not so much skill level when it comes to that.
I'm factoring in the financial because, remember,
I still don't know, though. People would still – the upside of Wentz, and I'm looking for – we're so tied into it. We're watching every game, every snap. Not that these other NFL organizations aren't. All they do is live off of film. That's what they do.
Right.
But to see that upside – the AAV of Carson Wentz is not that egregious where I think people would shy away from it, tying it to what he possibly can get back to if he plays to the top of his game. There's a couple of those I think we could debate. I really do. There's a couple of those. Sam Darnold being one, Wilson being another. Just because Carson Wentz wasn't just good. He was MVP, and that's the difference. MVP level. Of course, he didn't actually win it, but that's how great of a star he was that year, where I think Carson might be up on my list a little higher than you.
Yeah, again, I'm throwing in the money thing because don't forget the situation with the NFL cap this offseason. The cap is not growing as much as it has in the past. It's going to grow a little bit, but not enough for you to really make a dent.
What is it, 180?
Yeah, I think it went up like $6 million or something like that. Like something marginal, like something that's enough for you to sound like, a mid-level player, basically. But if you're a team like the Eagles or the Saints or the Broncos or, the Patriots are almost in cap hell. There's a lot of teams that are in a bad cap. Cowboys. There's a lot of tough decisions that have to be made this offseason. And for those teams, this cap is going to really restrict your options. Like the Cowboys, they can retain Dak Prescott or they could sign and trade Dak Prescott, but they can't do much else. Like, there's not a lot of cap space for them to just go out there and be like, go on a spending spree. You know what I mean? They go out and bring in a bunch of players that they really need. So they're going to need the draft more than ever. So there's a speculation out there, for example, that the Cowboys might trade one of their linebackers to try to get some more draft picks because they need more players who could fit under the cap.
Yeah, and they actually do a great job at drafting. When you look at their draft success, they have found these good players. The problem with their linebacking core, though, they're always banged up. Who would they trade? Van Der Esch? Well, that guy's always on the sideline. Same with Sean Lee, and it's not like that package with where he's at in his career.
Van Der Esch is younger, he has less injuries than Sean Lee. So I think that's where it makes sense.
I don't think Sean Lee gets you enough of a package to really rebuild anyway, just with his age of his career and
no,
how
but
much
Van Der Esch can.
Van Der Esch, yeah. What about Jalen Smith? Is there anything on the? Would that
They're not
be,
trading him.
Yeah, would that be something that intrigues
I don't believe
people?
there is a world where they would trade Jalen Smith. I just don't.
The Cowboys fascinate me with what they're going to do, even with, you mentioned the Dak Prescott stuff. What is the deal with him? Are they going to move forward with him? Is he going to be the guy? If I was a Dallas Cowboys fan, I'd be a little annoyed with how they played this one out with Dak Prescott.
Well, you should be annoyed.
Yeah.
The guy literally has proven himself to be one of the top-tier quarterbacks in this league, but you're bickering over years and dollars for a guy who obviously you were winning games with and you could struggle to win games without him. Like, to me, there's no better representation of how elite a quarterback is. Like, for example, Prescott is way beyond Wentz at this point. Like, the conversation last offseason for us was, who's a better quarterback? Would you rather have Wentz? Would you rather have Prescott? Well, as of right now, everyone's going to say Prescott because he has shown that he leaves the team, they go down the dumpster. Wentz gets off the field, Hurts makes you competitive. That's not a good look for Hurts, but it proves that Prescott deserves the contract and the money.
Yeah, it goes back to, if someone remakes Carson Wentz, I think the answer is easily Carson Wentz. Skill level-wise, it's Carson Wentz. It's just, can he put it all back together? Can a coach find a way to fix Carson Wentz? If Carson Wentz is fixed, I really don't think it's a debate. I think Carson Wentz is the better quarterback. So the talent's in there. Unfortunately, it's not going to get fixed here in Philadelphia, but, man, I do think Carson Wentz is the better quarterback. I really do.
Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN, alongside Hunter Brody live in the Matt Black Kia studios here on 97.3 ESPN. We are asking you as we are going through the show, listen, as the Eagles move forward, what do the Eagles do in the post-Wentz era? What is Wentz's value at this point as we move forward? You can comment at 609-403-0973 is the text. But also, as you're watching Facebook, YouTube, we'll get your comments as well here on 97.3 ESPN. And yes, we know about the whole Sixers rumors. We're reading all the Paul Hudrick coming up in the next hour. But for right now, we're going to stick to the Eagles conversation. We don't want to stray too far away from the conversation because a lot of people will have comments on this. And before we get to the comments, I want to ask you, Broads. I gave you a lot of quarterbacks there. So where does Wentz rank among all the available quarterbacks for you? What is his value to you compared to what is available on the market?
Yeah, I think that when you look at, you add the draft players as well on top of what is available in the market. Trevor Lawrence at number one is definitely someone that I think is above. I think it would just be easier for me to see who is above Carson Wentz. And I guess it would be Trevor Lawrence, it would be Matt Ryan, and it would be, like Justin Fields is intriguing to some probably. I'll throw Justin Fields in there. I think you'd be fourth or so on that list. I really do. I think you have him a little bit farther down. I don't think I would put Sam Darnold in that conversation because even though he might have that friendly deal right now for you, he's not going to bring you to a championship with his play next season. So you're going to have to get him signed. And it might be a different deal than Carson Wentz, but the AAV for a starting quarterback is what it is. You're going to have to pay your starting quarterback when it's time to pay him. What is going rate? What is the market? Carson Wentz is in that market range. It's a lot of money, I get it, but it's in that starting quarterback market. I'm not saying Sam Darnold would get to that level, but you're going to have to pay him if you trade for him. So I don't know if his value is as high as maybe you put it just because there's only 1 year left on there. Then you're going to have to re-sign him after that. I'd put him in that 4 or so category, in that range, which is good for the Eagles because that means, he's wanted. I would imagine that the market for Wentz is absolutely intriguing. I really do believe that. I could even put him higher, to be honest with you. I don't know if that's a bias showing, but I could see teams wanting. Yeah. I could see a team wanting Wentz over Matt Ryan, based off of age.
I just can't deny Matt Ryan's production to me.
Sure.
I feel like he hasn't shown a drop-off yet.
I can agree with you on that. I don't think he's a stiff by any means.
That's just my perspective. I think that and again, as you said also, though, there are maybe some teams that are more intrigued by others. Nothing we could do about that. I mentioned the Zach Wilson situation. The only reason why Zach Wilson's going ahead of Justin Fields in these mock drafts is because there are teams that specifically like Wilson's skill set. It's not they don't like Fields. They like Wilson more. Now, I don't like Wilson more, but I'm not running an NFL team, so we got to differentiate that a little bit. And the same thing with Wentz. There may be one team that says Wentz has got something, and another team that says it's not worth it to me. And you know what? It doesn't mean Wentz is not tradable. It just means not tradable to a certain team.
I agree with you on that. And I always just go back to, you've seen Wentz do it. Now, he has fallen off, and this has been a historic decline where we are left clueless, and we are now at the point where we are trading this quarterback. So I'm fully aware of what's happening here. But you've seen him do it. You've seen him play this well, and I just wonder, if you're around the league, do you value that? Knowing that Carson Wentz has played at an MVP level compared to these players that you don't know what you're going to get. How does the game translate for them? Do they have the skill set to be able to deliver at this stage?
Right.
You've seen Wentz do it, so he needs to be fixed, but you know it's there. Do teams value that more than a cheaper contract and a upside that you need to try and not convince yourself that it's there, but you're going in with faith that he will grow into that, where with Wentz, you're putting faith in that you'll fix him, but you know the intangibles were there at one point where it's not as much of a leap of faith.
Right, and that's why for me, I say, look, I would take Wentz over Jimmy G, Trubisky, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Cam Newton.
But it's crazy to me that we are even in this conversation of, well, at least Wentz is better than Jimmy Garoppolo, Mitch Trubisky, a journeyman quarterback who's 40 years old with a phenomenal beard and continues to win some really impressive games.
And a lot of children.
Yeah, that's where we're putting him. Oh, he's better than Fitzpatrick. That's such a big drop-off. I don't know, did it drop off that much? Am I being naive? Did he drop off that much where, hey, he's better than Trubisky, but he's not as good as Sam Darnold's position right now? Oof, that's ugly.
It's definitely a conversation. We'll get to some of your thoughts right now as you watch on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter at 973 ESPN. Josh Hennig filling for Mike Yell along with Hunter Brody here on 97.3 ESPN. Also get to the text at 609-403-0973. Now, the Joe Show asks an interesting question. Would you consider Wentz a bust? My initial answer is no, because I need more time. I feel like usually a bust is someone that's obvious. You know, like Ryan Leaf, Jamarcus Russell, guys like that. They were just like, it's just a huge, never hit the ceiling, never showed you anything. Wentz, I feel like the jury is still out.
Well, what if Ryan Leaf ended up having 1 year where he helped his team get to the Super Bowl and then he was a bust every other year? Is that would still be labeled the bust even if the Super Bowl came in a great season?
If Ryan Leaf led his team to the Super Bowl, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, for 1 year. But every other year, he was who he was.
I mean, he still might be a bust.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that's such an extreme.
I know. But that's what we're seeing in Wentz almost. It's an extreme.
Well, like, for example, you may not remember this. There's no football history. Doug Williams, okay? Doug Williams was a huge prospect coming out of college. He was drafted by Tampa. He was supposed to be the savior, and it didn't work out. And he was considering he wanted to get out of Tampa. Tampa's a bad situation. And he went to Washington, and the coach said, look, I can't promise you a starting job, but you can compete for the job. Well, he ends up winning them a Super Bowl. So he reached his potential, but he still was never what he was supposed to be.
Well,
so
if I throw...
It's tough.
No, I understand. If I asked you, was Doug Peterson a bust, your answer would right away be no, correct?
As a coach, no.
So would Carson Wentz be tied to that same conversation?
Maybe. And I think that's why it depends on what you mean by bust. I can't label him a bust yet because I feel like if he goes to another team and has a nice, successful career, you can't call him a bust because then he had 2 good years in Philly. Well, yeah, okay, never mind. 2 years in Philadelphia.
2's a good number.
Yeah, 2 years in good Philadelphia. Maybe he has like 4 good years on another team. I don't think it's a bust to me.
That's not a bust. And I'm the same guy, and I'm in the outlier when I say this. I don't think Nelson Aguilar was a bust because he was monstrous in that season winning a Super Bowl.
Yeah, but to me, Aguilar's different because he had 1 good year and everything else has been meh.
But he's doing well in Oakland. There's still some drops.
But he's the 3rd receiver.
But why would that be a bust?
Because you're a first-round pick.
Yeah, I still don't.
I
don't label
pick
him pick.
Needs to be one of my 2 best receivers. You draft Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, guys like that go in the first round, not the 3rd receiver on your team.
I know, but you tell me, Nelson Aguilar, he was huge in that Super Bowl, and he was huge in that whole entire 2017 run. Without him, you might not have that Super Bowl. I can't label him a bust.
Part of the reason why he was open was because Torrey Smith was out there burning the secondary, and he was wide open over the middle.
Sure, yeah, but that's any receiver, right? I mean,
I know. Stop.
What do you mean? You're a product of what's around you.
Yeah, but the best receivers find ways to get separation. If I'm using a first-round pick on you, you got to have better hands and better separation than Nelson Aguilar.
I'm not disagreeing with you. Obviously, I want someone better than Nelson Aguilar, but I truly do believe, personally, my opinion, not a bust. For what he did in 2017, I will not label Nelson Aguilar bust. So with that theory, I tied that together because I wanted to tie that with Wentz. To me, he won't be a bust. And to me, Doug Peterson won't be a bust. You can't look at that 4-year stretch of Doug Peterson, 5-year stretch with Doug Peterson, and say that it was a bust based off of what we saw.
Jeff Bone and Pookie says the medical staff ruined Wentz when he got that neck injury. I don't know about that. I think that you can't blame the medical staff for a concussion that was obviously an illegal hit that wasn't called an illegal.
Well, they changed their coaching, or not their coaching staff. They changed their medical staff, a year before? Yeah, 2 years before. Right, exactly. So at what point is it, hey, how about it's not the staff's problem here? Because all the time people want to just go to it's the medical staff. Although I do think there's got to be something to it when every year if they have another year again of this
that's
type
not the
of
medical
injury.
staff. That's the strength and conditioning
yes,
coaches.
Sure. I agree
by the way,
with that.
we have new ones coming in apparently.
Yes, I agree with that. It's more about making sure your body's ready and things that you can do prior, stretching the right way. Right. Strength and conditioning for sure should be more on the hot seat than
the medical
staff.
Let's get a comment on the Facebook feed. Moon Walker says, do the players around the league still want to play with Wentz? That's an interesting question. Because remember, Alshon Jeffrey came to Philadelphia to play with Wentz. Remember that? Deshaun Jackson when he came back to Philly, he says, I'm looking forward to playing with Wentz. If he gets traded somewhere, is that perception still out there?
I think it will be, but I also feel that everyone will give him an opportunity to prove himself. I would find it hard to believe in a professional setting in the NFL, here comes a quarterback that does have a track record of being able to play at a high level, and they're just going to shut him down completely and not give him a chance. I find that hard to believe. Now, if his personality shows and he can't relate in another locker room, and then over time you see the same issues occur, then it's almost telling of how bad it was here too, and it's a common denominator. It's Carson Wentz's personality. Right from the jump, though, is someone going to write him off? Maybe a handful of guys, but in a professional setting, you would imagine that they would at least give him the chance to earn the respect of the locker room, especially coming from the quarterback position. If it was a lineman or a wide receiver or safety, I think it's different, but it's the quarterback. I think everyone's going to give him at least a chance to either prove himself or go in the other direction. Would you agree with that?
Again, it gets back to the thing that you said earlier. There's so many variables that go into this. You know what I mean? It's not all black and white. It's not all straightforward. There's other variables.
Well, think about how many teammates or how many friends. Like, there's probably, if he goes to the Colts, how many people on the Colts know players on the Eagles? Hey, what do you think of Wentz, this and that? Well, if you ask Fletcher Cox or Jason Kelsey, you might get a good response. If you ask Alshon Jeffrey, you might throw him under the bus. So there's definitely a lot of talking happening behind closed doors with teammates and friends around the league. It's a brotherhood. They all know each other. So there's probably a talk going between locker rooms, I'd imagine.
We got a comment on the text board at 609-403-0973. Mike K in Philly says, if Wentz was as good as you guys say, then why haven't teams traded for him yet? He's not that good. Overpaid and always hurt. Well, first of all, the always hurt thing has been dispelled because outside of the concussion that he had in the Seahawks game, he played every game he was slated to start the last 2 seasons. And then you think about it, 2016, he played every game that year. He played every game until he tore his knee. Then he came back from a knee tear and he broke his back. So is it that Wentz is always hurt, or is it that we overvalue the times he's been hurt? Like, for example, would you say that Derek Carr is injury prone?
No.
But yet he's played about the same amount of games as Wentz has over the last few years. He has a similar injury history. Would you say that? I'm trying to think of another quarterback. All right. Is Alex Smith injury prone?
Whew, he just had such a gruesome one. I mean,
It was one injury, though,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. It's harder because of where he's at in his career to tie it together.
Is Nick Foles injury prone?
Now that one, you can make the argument that he is if you want to. You could say that he is. Would I say that? No, I'd say it's the nature of football, but you could say that he is an injury-prone guy.
Right. So we say things like guys are always hurt. Look, we can argue about guys getting overpaid or not being paid all day long. That's subjective. At the end of the day, Mike K and Philly, here's the problem with saying guys overpaid. Everyone's overpaid. Everyone. Tell me a guy in the NFL who's not overpaid. Who's going to tell me? Dak Prescott? That's one dude.
Yeah, but everyone's overpaid because it's pro sports, but you could be overpaid in the pro sports market.
Yeah, but I hate the concept of saying the guy's overpaid is the reason why, because the guy, what Mike K is inferring is that if Wentz is as good as you say, why haven't teams traded for him yet? And then he says he's overpaid and always hurt. Well, he's not always hurt. We've already established that. And realistically,
I don't think he's overpaid. I think he's market value in terms of the contract.
He is what a typical quarterback in today's world is getting paid.
Yes, I would agree with you on that. Why haven't teams traded for him yet? There's teams with offers on the table. You make it seem like they haven't picked up the phone once. You're making it seem like there's not a couple teams in play. You're making it seem like the Colts haven't discussed things with Howie Roseman.
Right.
There's a reason why the trade hasn't happened yet. Maybe Howie didn't get the... Howie's going to play this where he wants something so extreme. A team's going to come in and say something that probably doesn't satisfy Howie, and then they're going to go back and forth for weeks and weeks and play this cat and mouse game until
before March 19th.
Yeah, exactly. So
and they'll drop it during the Villanova game.
Exactly. So, Mike K, that's why he hasn't been traded yet. I just laid it out for you. This is how NFL trades happen. I'll ask you the same thing, Mike K. Why isn't Deshaun Watson traded yet? Why isn't Sam Darnold traded yet? Why isn't Jimmy Garoppolo traded yet? Why was there one trade so far, which was the Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford one?
Why is Dak Prescott not re-signed
yet?
yet?
This is the business. This is how it goes. So this is the business is your answer on why he has not been traded yet.
Now, back to the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN.
Josh Aguilar and Hunter Brody here on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get back to your messages here on 609-403-0973. And we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, where you can watch the show here on 97.3 ESPN. Let me get this texter in here. We talk about Nelson Aguilar. People are texting in about Aguilar, which is hilarious.
Yeah, because everyone probably is going against me with that statement, I would imagine, unless I'm wrong.
Well, Cole from LBI says Nelson Aguilar on the text board at 609-403-0973. Cole from LBI says Nelson Aguilar is the second option, number one receiver in Oakland, but he is a borderline bust. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that, and I'm double-checking it right now. Yeah, okay. So Aguilar had the second most receptions among wide receivers last year.
But you're going to throw in tight end play here.
No, I'm thinking of tight end.
Okay, I was going to say I didn't know
among wide receivers.
Okay.
Hunter Renfrow had more catches. He had less yards, though. He had less big plays.
Yeah, makes sense.
But he had more catches. So who's really the number one receiver there? Is it the receivers? Is it Aguilar or Renfrow? Because if you sort it by targets, there's a huge disparity between Darren Waller and Aguilar. To me, Waller is like a receiver.
Yeah,
at that
he's
point.
I would say he's their number one option, if you will.
It's a 62 target difference.
Yeah.
That's a huge number.
Yeah. So then he would be your I would probably say, because like it's almost, how would you rate Edelman to Tom Brady? A number one receiver? No, but he got a lot of targets because it was like a safety thing. That's how I would value Renfro. It's almost like, yeah, he might get a lot of targets, but he's not a number one receiver.
Yeah, Oakland situation is weird. I mean, you look, actually had the best target to catch percentage of all the receivers was Henry Ruggs. he almost was at 80% in terms of catches to targets last year, whereas Aguilar, he was 50%. So, if that's your number one receiver, Cole and LBI, you're right. He's still a bust. All right. We got another break to hit. We'll get to more of your comments coming up next. Josh, Hennig, Hunter Brody here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on 97.3 ESPN. This is the Sports Bash along with Hunter Brody here on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, we will be joined by Paul Hudrick, our Sixers insider, coming up at 3:20. Geoff Mosher, football at 4. Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast at 4 p.m. But right now, we are still talking Eagles, Wentz, Nelson Aguilar, apparently, and more here at 609-403-0973 and live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You are hanging out with us here on 97.3 ESPN. Before we get away from the Aguilar stuff, I do want to remind people, we will get to the Sixers stuff. I do see some people asking about different trades. We know that Blake Griffin is being sat. He's been pulled from games by the Pistons. They're not even playing a game tomorrow because the Spurs have a positive COVID test. So Blake Griffin is not going to play for at least a few days, it looks like. And there's people, is Blake Griffin, DeLon Wright, there's rumors about George Hill out there with the Sixers. We will get to all that with Paul Hudrick. He is on the inside. He has all the information. That's coming up in less than 20 minutes. So we are not ignoring the Sixers. We will get to them. But right now, the people are flooding us with comments. We got to give the people what they want.
That's my motto. You got to give the people what they want. They want to talk Nelson Aguilar. It is funny, though, how that name triggers people.
It does.
Is there another name outside? Not the big names.
Howie
obviously.
Roseman?
Well, that's what I was going to say. Outside of Howie Roseman, Ben Simmons. Clearly, Nelson Aguilar does not really have that type of power with that type of, play. So is there another athlete in this city, or that was recently in this city, that would trigger people that isn't that much of a star?
That isn't a star.
Right. It can't be not Howie a star. That might trigger people alone. But not the bigger names.
Reese Hoskins? Is he's not a star,
I don't
right?
think I don't think that his situation eats people up. You don't bring up Reese Hoskins and then there's people texting into the text board, oh, Reese Hoskins, this and that, like what just happened
What
with
about
Nelson
Tobias?
Aguilar.
What about Tobias Harris?
Prior to this year?
Yeah.
I could see that. Yeah, definitely. That's a name
That fits the category we're talking about?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a name, definitely. I'm trying to think with hockey, not so much
Any
anymore.
goaltender?
Right. Claude Giroux would be a name, but he
he's a
doesn't
star.
count. He's a star. Big
Right, he's
name.
a captain. But
Yeah.
I mean, like any goaltender's ever been in Philadelphia for the last 20 years for
Would
Carter Hart.
Pinkston be a name that got people fired up?
No. People kind of knew Pinkston was Pinkston. You
And
know what I mean?
he's only brought up because that era was you had no receivers.
Right.
So it's a different way to look at it.
Like back then, the guy that annoyed people was probably someone like, you remember the safety Michael Lewis?
Sure.
I remember people complain about him. People would complain about.
Jalen Mills?
No, I mean going back.
No, I know. I'm just thinking, is Jalen Mills a guy? Because Jalen Mills gets a lot of hate. If you bring up Mills,
Yeah.
I think there's a
Not
minor
as
reaction.
much as Aguilar, though.
Not as much, but there is this reaction of he pisses me off a bit. I'm just saying in general. I do think that there's a reaction
King
to
Dunlap,
Jalen Mills.
people got really mad at him. People hated him with a passion. They were like, this guy's supposed to be this big, strong guy. He can't block anybody. He's a turnstile, blah, blah, blah. People get really mad at him. I'm trying to think if there's any other guys outside of football, though. Like,
I'm thinking of baseball. I'm thinking of the
Andre
Phillies.
Iguodala was really spit on a lot because he was supposed to be the replacement of Allen Iverson. You're the next AI, Andre Iguodala, but he never lived up to the star power.
Yeah, but you brought up Tobias and now you brought up Iggy. The difference between them and Nelson Aguilar is we were upset with money. We were upset with the contract side of things.
Right.
With Aguilar, that wasn't even a problem.
Well, it's like
Except for the last year when they decided to bring him back, that was a pretty decent
Right.
cap hit for
well,
him.
like Nelson, Rich in the Villa shot us a text on text board at 609-403-0973. Rich in the Villa says Nelson Aguilar is only a bust because the organization picked him that high. They overvalued him. But that's part of what goes into you being a bust, is someone over or under. Like, someone's not a draft steal because, well, they picked him that. Well, no, that's what makes you a steal.
right.
You know, Brady's a draft steal, right? Russell Wilson is a draft steal. Joe Montana is a draft steal. Malcolm Jenkins was a draft steal because where he was drafted, theoretically.
Would we
he became
think
a
of-
safety later.
Yeah. Would we think of Tom Brady differently if he was a first-round pick?
100%.
Do you think so, though?
Yes.
Even if you have this same resume, I don't know how much different I can view you. I think one of the reasons why he is where he is today is because he was drafted there.
Right.
But if he has the same resume as a third overall pick or where he was drafted, while the story to us is like, oh, wow, look at what he did out of Michigan and all, but I think his legacy is still the
It's
same.
part of the aura, though. It's part of the, the story. The story is the story. You know what I mean? Peyton Manning, people look at him differently because he was the first overall pick. Brady, they look at him differently because he was, 198 or whatever it was. I think that's part of it.
Yeah, I just don't know if because he's so damn good that I don't know how you can move higher on my list, I guess is what I'm saying. Or I don't know how I can think any differently of you.
You might knock him down a peg.
I don't think I would, though. How could I?
Well, you might not, but there
Yeah.
are other people who would because they're like, well, Brady had that gap of years where he didn't win anything.
If Trevor Lawrence won 7 Super Bowls and went to 10 Super Bowls and had the same resume, I wouldn't say, well, Tom Brady's better because he was drafted late.
No, but you might say that Trevor Lawrence maybe had a better situation at times than Brady did. Or maybe you say Brady had a better situation. I said to somebody at the gym on Saturday, they came up to me, I have a buddy of mine. He will remain nameless because, I don't want to disparage the innocent, but he always comes up to me with random stuff. You know what I mean? And he's a good guy, so I don't, but he came up to me and goes, Tom Brady. And
He said 2 words to you. Walked up to you. What were you on the elliptical? What were you doing at this time?
I was drinking my intra-workout BCAAs.
Sitting on the bench or something?
Just standing there.
Okay,
He
standing
just
there.
kind of came up out of nowhere.
Gave you a point and said Tom Brady.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, and then I turned to him like, and? I'm like, so what are you discounting the Bucs defense? He goes, well, Tom Brady's the GOAT. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. I said, if Tom Brady didn't have the Patriots defenses in those first 3 Super Bowls shutting down the greatest show on turf and Donovan McNabb and Jake Delhomme and Adam Vinatieri kicking those field goals, is Brady still the GOAT? And he's like, well, it's like, that's
Gave
the
you a
end.
stutter.
Right, you gave you a little, thinking about it a little bit. And that's part of the problem. When you talk about athletes in these terms, Trevor Lawrence, he may walk into a situation that will define him, right? He's either going to elevate the players around him or they're going to help elevate him. No one's saying Tom Brady isn't a great quarterback, but you can't deny the fact that his first few years in New England, he was a game manager. He wasn't always winning the games for you as he has later in his career. And by the way, he had 3 interceptions in that NFC Championship game, and the Bucs defense basically limited Aaron Rodgers. So it's not that Tom Brady isn't great, but maybe you look at Trevor Lawrence and be like, yeah, but Trevor didn't have the great defenses to work with, and then he does all that.
I love that you just brought that up because this does translate to, and this is the second time I'm going to reference what Billy said over the weekend, but we were talking about Tom Brady being the greatest winner of all time. And I thought that there was an interesting debate going around Twitter because it's a team sport. Should we value Serena Williams? Should we value Tiger Woods as a different, do they deserve to be higher on the list? Because as you just stated, if you throw 3 interceptions, but your defense carries you and you advance to the next round, and then you have a good game, well, yeah, you're still a champion. You won the Super Bowl, but you got your ass carried the week before where if you have a bad day and you're Serena Williams, you're out of the Australian Open.
But
you're
that's where,
out of Wimbledon.
That's where I have to separate.
So you don't even put
team-
them in the same you put team and individual sports separately.
Well, to me, there's 2 different lists. There's everybody on one list, and then there's team sports accomplishments. Because to me, if you're rating individual greatness, you can't just go off championships. Because Wilt Chamberlain has less rings than Bill Russell, but no one in their right mind is going to say that Bill Russell is a better player than Wilt Chamberlain. the whole debate with LeBron and Jordan. But if you bring Kobe into the conversation, now the conversation gets interesting. You know what I mean? Now you're like, wait a minute, there's 3 guys to factor in here. Whereas team only, now you're valuing the team's success more. Whereas if you go with the individual, you might value the individual's accomplishment more. And then it's, well, what's the individual's trophy line on the wall? And then you got to say Tiger, Serena, Michael Phelps, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like now you're really reaching down, at MMA, John Jones, George St. Pierre, now you're really diluting the pool, right? You know what I mean? Whereas if you keep it just to team sports, then it's, well, how many rings you got? That's for me how I look at it.
Yeah, it's a very difficult thing to do and separate because it's crazy to think about. Tom Brady was bad in that NFC Championship game. He threw 3 interceptions. That's
and by the way,
brutal.
You know who won me this money this weekend? Serena Williams.
Oh.
You know why? Because she was an underdog at the Aussie Open, and I saw her at plus 140, and I just banged that thing on my sports app, and I was like, let's go.
Yeah, I haven't been. I've had the Australian Open on. I haven't been to the point where I've been insanely digesting a full match. It's been very good background noise for me lately, but I haven't had that one match yet where it's like, all right, here we go. And I think as the tournament goes on, that naturally gets
Well, for
better.
example, you sent me a picture of your setup on Saturday.
Yes, I did.
You had the UFC on the big TV and
Yes,
then the
I
2
did.
hockey games on the smaller TV. Well, for me, because I don't have TVs all over my wall like you do, but, for me, I had the UFC fights on. But then the secondary thing, I was going back and forth between Serena's match and the NBA game between the Nets and the Warriors. So, it's one of those things where, what's on the, we call it what's on the big screen.
What's on the big screen? Oh, no doubt. But I mean, man, Serena in that last match, yeah, I love that. I love watching someone else get pissed off. Oh, you can't beat Serena?
Oh, you know who else is winning money? Jessica Pegula.
Oh, yeah?
The daughter of the Pegula family who owned the Bills.
How about that?
She keeps upsetting people. That's 3 straight rounds. She's just, throw the money on the underdog, a little bit of, boom.
Look at you with the Australian Open, huh?
Well, you know me. I'm about the value. I try to find the value.
That's right. That's what we all do. Find the value. What is the value, Josh?
But part of the value is the Joe Show answered our question. He's got a guy in Phillies history who was kind of like the Nelson Aguilar.
Would you agree with the Joe Show?
I don't know. I'm a little conflicted on this. Mike Lieberthal with the Phillies.
I don't think it's to the level of Nelson Aguilar, but
It's
I understand why the name was thrown out there.
I understand why the name is thrown out there. Yeah, there was a contingent of people in the late 90s and early 2000s that kind of looked at Lieberthal sideways because it was like, you're good enough to be an all-star, but you're not good enough to be one of the best catchers in baseball. It was a strange dynamic because those Phillies teams, they were either really bad or just good enough to keep you interested. And Lieberthal was a part of that whole dynamic.
No, I agree with you completely. I thought of a name, but he's a coach. I guess he's technically a manager. But the name Gabe Kapler. That reaction, that sparks a reaction.
And it wasn't because of anything except for who he was.
I was in that boat.
Oh, you were.
I was in that boat, and I'm proud of it.
You would say, I hate the face. He's like, I hate the face.
Oh, yeah. But it wasn't because I'm anti-West Coast guy or good-looking guy, works
West
out
Coast bias?
Yeah, it's not because of that. I did not like Gabe Kapler culture in the clubhouse. I thought that was an issue, and that was a big part of it. But the reaction of the name Gabe Kapler, I think, might even be higher than the reaction of the name Nelson Aguilar. Because with Aguilar, do you think people felt bad for him towards the end?
No.
You don't think so at all?
No, I think people were so over him, they just wanted to get out. They were done.
But he wasn't a bad dude. He always faced the camera. He always did the right things in these brutal moments where I think
you're being objective. See,
what?
In this situation, you're being objective. If you got to think about it, people reacting is not objective. It's emotional. It's subjective. It's this, you called it. It's what generates that reaction in people.
Yeah.
Well, being objective and factoring in everything doesn't generate a reaction because then you can't be reactionary. Now you're being thoughtful and thinking through the situation.
Now the Joe Show comes back at us with Chip Kelly. I don't know if is a coach list different than a player list?
I think it's one and the same.
I think so, too.
I think you could have it in reaction to anybody.
Am I crazy to think that Chip Kelly isn't on the list to the level of a Gabe Kapler?
I think he's in the category.
You do?
Yeah.
You'd put him in the Gabe Kapler. I think he's under Gabe Kapler. For some reason, that Gabe Kapler reaction was
very
nuts.
much below.
Okay.
Because
I'm
remember,
not discrediting.
Because here's the thing with Chip Kelly. When he sent away LaShawn McCoy and Deshaun Jackson and the whole Riley Cooper thing, and then the whole, they traded and brought in Sam Bradford, there were a lot of Eagle fans like, what is this guy doing? This guy is strange. I mean, he's drafting Marcus Smith and Nelson Aguilar, and he's trading for Sam Bradford, and you got rid of the franchise's all-time leader in rushing yards.
But I guess right now, I understand in the moment it was there, and maybe it's because they won the Super Bowl. I don't know. But when I hear the name Chip Kelly, I don't think that rage is still there.
There was
for
a
me.
rage there.
There was, but is there still now? Does the name Chip Kelly move the needle now?
I got to place us in the point in history.
But when we talk about Nelson Aguilar, right now we're talking about him, and it sparks the rage. If we bring up Chip Kelly, I don't know if all of those emotions come back into people.
Not right now. But in the moment, there was.
In the moment, yes. But I also think that that's another discussion.
Really quick before we hit the break, Chris Hernandez on Facebook says, what about Al Horford? See, Al Horford wasn't as intense, though. But it was there. There was a distaste with the idea of Al Horford in general.
Too short of a term here, maybe. If you had to deal with another season of him, then I think you might have built. But I think that's the floor of the list.
That's the concept. Chris understands the concept.
Yes.
And I appreciate Chris understanding what we're going. Like Chip Kelly from the Joe Show, Al Horford from Chris Hernandez on Facebook. That's what we're going for. Mike Lieberthal, maybe not so much.
I think we're on the same page here.
He's Hunter Brody. I'm Josh Hennig here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. The Sports Bash being brought to you by the brand new Matt Blatt Nissan. They are now open on the Black Horse Pike at Egg Harbor Township next to Home Depot. Visit them online at mattblattnissan.com. Well, speaking of Sixers, we'll get back into the Sixers. Are the Sixers going to trade for somebody? Are they going to make a trade before Howie Roseman? Paul Hudrick, our Sixers insider, joins us next here on the Sports Bash along with Hunter Brody. I'm Josh Hennig, filling in for Mike Yell here on 97.3 ESPN FM. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Yell here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN, 97.3 ESPN mobile app. It is time for our Inside the Sixers segment right now, and he joins us each and every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. The one and only Paul Hudrick joins the show here on 97.3 ESPN. Paul, we've been talking about the Eagles, but there's trade speculation rumors going with the 76ers. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Josh. How are you, man?
We're doing pretty good. So let's start with the most ridiculous thing, and we'll let you answer this question. So Blake Griffin. I feel like that's become a question now, all of a sudden, if the Sixers would actually trade for Blake Griffin.
Well, there is no scenario in which they would trade for Blake Griffin. That is an impossibility just because of that salary and what you'd be paying. For people who might have thought Tobias Harris's contract is bad, that contract might be the worst contract in the entire NBA right now. Him and Russell Westbrook will be pretty close, but I would give the nod to Blake Griffin. It is the worst contract in basketball. I would be shocked if anybody trades for that contract. I think they are looking to a really ugly buyout situation just because it's just so much money. And I don't know what Detroit's going to have to do to get out of it, but they're going to have to figure it out. Now, if he gets bought out, would I maybe have interest? Maybe as a backup 4 and possibly a backup stretch 5. Possibly, but I don't know if that's what he wants. I don't know what opportunities would be out there for him if he's bought out. I don't necessarily, like I said, a trade is impossible. A buyout, it's possible, but I don't necessarily see it. But I wouldn't totally be against it if that scenario occurred.
So with that being said, let's touch on the two names that are actually more realistic: DeLon Wright, George Hill. What's the latest on those fronts?
So, yeah, I mean, for me, George Hill was a guy, as soon as he got traded to the Thunder, I thought he made a ton of sense for the Sixers. A veteran guy, can, hit outside shots. He's a true point guard. A couple of years ago with the Bucks, I thought he outplayed Eric Bledsoe in the playoffs. So, I mean, this is a guy that has plenty of experience. He's played for a lot of good teams. He's played for a lot of good coaches. As a backup point guard, I think he would be an outstanding fit. I think he would elevate this team in a big way. Obviously, Daryl Morey and Sam Presti, who is Oklahoma City's GM, they have a good relationship already. They worked out the Al Horford trade this offseason. I don't see any reason why you couldn't make it work. It would take, I think, with Hill's salary, basically Mike Scott and like Tony Bradley would probably get it done financially. You'd probably have to throw in a second, but I think that's a move that would make a ton of sense. DeLon Wright, I think also would make a lot of sense. Not as good of a shooter as George Hill, not as much experience as George Hill, but is crafty off the dribble. Again, a true point guard. If you pair him with Shake Milton, I think you might have something there. I think that could work. He doesn't turn the ball over. Doc Rivers has complained now 2 games in a row about the bench unit not moving the basketball, the ball sticking. I think you add Hill or Wright, and either of those guys would elevate the bench immediately.
You were always big on Shake, but did the last 2 games show you his importance even more? I'm having a problem, though, with obviously his loss is going to change the way that this bench plays and the rotation and how guys have to play more minutes and all, but I feel it's such an extreme drop. And I think Shake Milton's a good player, but it seems too extreme that you fall off this bad just because of Shake Milton. So I'm personally having a hard time trying to juggle that.
Yeah, I mean, bros, for me, I've been saying all along, I still thought their bench, and as you said, I love Shake. I still think Shake's a huge part of this team. And like you said, when he doesn't play, you see the huge drop off the bench, what it takes. And to be honest with you, I wasn't thrilled with the bench with Shake Milton being a part of it. I still think there are a couple significant upgrades to be made. One, like I just said, a true point guard, ball handler type player that can run the offense, get you into your sets, and just really calm things down. And then a stretch big, a backup 4/stretch big, I think is what you're looking for. Like a guy like Bielitsa from the Kings, or even, if Daryl Morey can make nice with the Rockets, a PJ Tucker, like a guy that can play the backup 4, but then could also small ball match up in a 5 situation and play the 5. That's the kind of guy I think they need. So I still think the Sixers starting unit is really good. I think they can compete with anybody. And I think you saw that in the Phoenix game where they kept up in that game. They actually outplayed the Sun starters really for the first half. And then the bench unit just really, they were behind the 8 ball all game, and the Sixers couldn't overcome it. The way Monty Williams kind of staggered his lineup too, where, Devin Booker was playing against, some of the Sixers bench unit. You saw how disastrous that was, and then Doc adjusted and kind of staggered his bench. So, yeah, I think, first of all, yes, you see the value of Shake Milton, how good I think he is, and I think he is that good, but also that there were issues, even when he's in the lineup, I don't think this bench is good enough.
Paul Hudrick joining us on the Boardwalk kind of hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, check out his podcast coming in for a landing at Paul Hudrick on Twitter. Check out all of his work at 973ESPN.com. With all that being said, what should be the priority when it comes to improving the bench? Should it be a guard? Should it be a stretch 4? Or should it be something else, Paul?
For me, number 1 would be a guard. I want a guy who can create offense for himself, create offense for others. I think that, to me, would be the number 1 priority. So if you can get a George Hill in here, you can get a DeLon Wright in here, one of those, a type of player like that, who is just can run the show, can get you into your offense, but can also, hit the occasional outside shot, can score for himself, can pass the ball and create for others. I think that, to me, would just make them better. I think it would take pressure off Shake Milton. I think it would help him. He'd play more off the ball. So I think that could help him a lot in a lot of ways to take, and Doc Rivers said it too. He said all the guys he has on the second unit, other than Matisse and Dwight Howard, who were in there for defense and for rebounding, they're all scorers. Korkmaz, Milton, and even Maxey, Mike Scott is a shooter. Like, they all want to score the basketball. They're not great passers. So I think they need that. I think they need a passer who can just run the show. So I think that is my top priority. And yeah, then number 2 for me would be still an upgrade of the backup 4 and a stretch big that can really, help open things up. So to me, I don't think it's an either or. I think it's both. I think they need to make a move for both. We'll see what happens. But if you're only going to do one, I think the point guard / shot creator is the guy that I would prioritize.
How much of this is just a standard West Coast swing where, look, you play 72 games? If you're a championship caliber team, you win in a normal 82-game season, you win mid-50s or so. That's still a lot of losses. So it's obvious that they need help. Everyone is acknowledging that. But how much of this, right now they're 1-2 playing Utah tonight, is this just naturally you're going away from home, you're hitting the West Coast, you're playing some tougher teams, all right, you fall? How much of it is that more so? I just feel the reaction when they win, this team can win a championship. When they lose, oh, they got to move Danny Green to the bench. This guy stinks. How are they going to do it? It's like, let's calm down and just acknowledge that, look, they're going on the road. They're playing some tough opponents. I'm not happy they're losing, but, I don't know. How much of it would fall into that category for you?
Yeah, I mean, bros, that's a lot of it, is that they're just playing some really good basketball teams with some really good players. They go the worst team they're playing on the trip is Sacramento, and Sacramento won, I think, 7 of 8 or 8 of 9 coming into that game. And that was a tough win against De'Aaron Fox, who was the Western Conference Player of the Week. So that was a tough matchup in and of itself. Then you have to play Damian Lillard and Gary Trent Jr., who is playing at a ridiculously high level right now. And you got, 2010 or whatever, Carmelo Anthony you had to go against as well. Then you have to play Phoenix, who has Devin Booker and Chris Paul, who is also red hot. They've won 6 in a row. At both those teams, Portland and Phoenix, if they were in the East, they would be the 2 and the 3 seed right now. And then now tonight you got to play Utah, who is the best team in the NBA right now, red hot. And for anyone who doesn't realize how good Utah is, Utah has basically everybody on their roster that isn't a center can shoot. They have Donovan Mitchell, they have Jordan Clarkson, they have Mike Conley, who's playing great. They have Joe Ingles, who's playing out of his mind. Bogdanovich is playing great. Royce O'Neal. I mean, they are so deep and so good right now that, if the Sixers go up one, like you said, bro, do you want them to go 1-3? Of course not. You want them to, at least go 2-2. If they go 2-2, to me, that's actually impressive because of how daunting this road trip is and how good all the teams are and how good basketball all those teams are playing. If you go 1-3, though, yeah, it's not the end of the world. It's not the desired outcome, but it's not the end of the world. It's a very difficult road trip against good basketball teams. So if they win tonight in Utah and they go 2-2 on a trip, that would be, to me, an incredibly impressive West Coast swing.
With all that being said, do you also feel like there's something to be taken that can be learned from this West Coast week, aside from the fact they need some more bench depth? Like, there's something about maybe like the way they're playing, their style of playing, maybe how they're using certain lineups together. Is there something specific outside from the out-of-bounds play that they can learn from this trip?
Well, I think you're seeing Ben Simmons, how he can be featured offensively, and he's starting to figure some things out. I'm seeing, like, the post-ups are nice, but I'm also seeing some plays where he's turning and facing the basket, almost like Joel Embiid has kind of figured out that if you get in that triple threat position and you face the basket, it puts defenders in a bind. And I think you're seeing, as good as Tobias Harris has been, and I think he's played at if not close to an all-star level, when the offense runs through Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, that is your best bet. When everything is running through those guys, and they're playing their best basketball, they're really tough to stop. And like I said, on this trip in general, the starters have been winning their matchups. The starters have outplayed the opponent's starters, to me, in all 3 games. So that, to me, like, I saw someone like came at me on Twitter saying like, oh, they really need to improve the starting lineup. I'm like, I don't know what team you have been watching, but this starting lineup has been outstanding. It is the bench. That is the sore spot right now. So I think what you could take, if you're looking for a positive to take from, I think it's that this starting unit, I think, is as good as anybody's in the NBA. And the way Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons are playing right now, I think they're both peaking right now. And that, to me, is the most encouraging thing. And on both ends of the floor, they're both playing excellent two-way basketball.
I feel Doc Rivers goes with the philosophy sometimes of saving Ben Simmons defensively. Like, for example, CP3 wasn't on the floor, but Danny Green was guarding Booker, and he was on Payne for a little bit. And that definitely allowed Booker to get into his bag a bit and get some points there. And I just wonder, do you like that philosophy? I understand it. And I see why you would think that. And then Ben, and you give guys different looks too, and that can totally change the way that opponents are operating. It's like, whoa, Ben, oh, Danny, those are 2 different style of players. But is that the best way to handle this?
I don't mind it because, and the other thing you got to remember too, bros, is like, especially guys like Booker or Dame Lillard, they use ball screens so much. So they want you to switch. Like, they want to find a mismatch and hunt it. So when Ben Simmons is playing off the ball, that makes it when he's playing off of a guy like Booker, and Danny Green is actually his man, that makes it easier for Ben Simmons to come over and rotate and help. So I think that's a part of it too. I think Doc likes the idea of Ben Simmons kind of wreaking havoc and not having to focus on maybe the other team's best player and doing that. So I think there's an argument to be made for both. I think there's an argument to be made for, maybe Ben Simmons should be covering the best team's best player throughout the game. And then also it makes sense sometimes to have him almost in, like, they call it like a roamer role, where he's just kind of, again, really helping out rotation wise, looking for steals, looking for deflections, looking to get his hands on the basketball. Now, I also think it's the regular season. I think if it's the playoffs, so like let's just say, for instance, the Sixers play the Celtics in the playoffs, Ben Simmons is going to cover Jason Tatum, I would think, from the opening tip. I would think. I don't know that, but that's what I would believe. And I think too, a part of it is him saving fouls. And again, in the playoffs, it's not you're not getting as many calls. They let you play a little bit more physical. So maybe Ben Simmons can play more and have a little bit more wiggle room to not maybe get in that foul trouble. And then I also think it's an energy thing. As I mentioned, Ben Simmons is playing great offensively as well. So if you're asking him to guard Devin Booker for 40 minutes, that's a lot of energy exerted on one end of the floor. And maybe he doesn't have that energy on the offensive end of the floor to push the tempo or come up with a big play. So it's a give and take in a lot of ways. And I don't necessarily think there is a 100% right answer. But as we get closer to bigger games, and especially in playoff games, I imagine Ben Simmons will take on the toughest defensive assignment when the bigger games start to come.
Well, they certainly got a tough one tonight. The Jazz tonight, you hear all the action right here on 97.3 ESPN at 9 p.m. Arguably the best team in the NBA right now is the Utah Jazz. Devin Mitchell, Rudy Gobert. I mean, the whole team. Clarkson looks like a sixth man of the year coming off the bench. It's ridiculous. So what are some of the challenges, aside from the obvious, for the Sixers tonight in Utah?
So it's just that Utah, like I said, they have got like multiple guys who can not only put the ball on the floor, but then they're all shooting like, I'm not even kidding. They have like 6 guys shooting over 40% from 3. That is insanity. And then you look, Mitchell, Connolly, Ingles, Clarkson, all of them can take you off the dribble. Like the Sixers would kill for like one other guy that can take people off the dribble. The Jazz have like 4 of them. So I think that's what your issue is that you, kind of to Broad's question, like, sure, you could put Ben Simmons on Donovan Mitchell, but then Danny Green's got to cover Mike Connolly. And then when the bench comes on, someone's got to cover Jordan Clarkson. Someone's got to handle Joe Ingles in the pick and roll because he's one of the more dangerous pick and roll players. He's so good at finding guys kind of on those short rolls. So, and then you have really good screeners in Gobert and then Favors off the bench. So they just have a lot of different ways to beat you. A team that can take you off the dribble, but then also shoot elite from the outside. It is a pick your poison situation. And it's going to be as good as the Sixers have been defensively at times. It is going to be a serious challenge for them tonight.
He is Paul Hudrick, our Sixers insider for 97.3 ESPN.com. Joins the Sports Bash every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for Inside the Sixers segment here on 97.3 ESPN. Follow him on Twitter at Paul Hudrick on Twitter. Of course, you can check out his podcast, Coming In for a Landing. As all guests, he appeared on the Boardwalk Out Hotline and live on the YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter streams, wearing, as you can see there on the stream, a Jurassic Park shirt. Now that's an old school shirt. That's not Jurassic World. That's Jurassic Park. Know the difference, people. Yeah, I know some people get them mixed up. You know what I mean, Paul? People. Yeah.
That's
bros.
shameful.
Bros, if you watched any Jurassic movies,
no.
See what I'm dealing with here, Paul?
No. And I know you're big Batman. Like, yeah, you guys can have all those conversations. I'll sit in the back and think about how Ben Simmons needs to shoot.
Well, we're diversifying our portfolio, okay?
You got to have an outlet, right? You got to.
I do. I watch the Kardashians. That's my outlet. Reality TV.
I think on that note, Josh, I
love terrible reality television. That's my outlet. You guys have fun with dinosaurs and stomping on people. I'll watch Kardashians.
Yeah. To each their own.
Catch you later, Paul.
All right, guys.
He's Hunter Brody, who doesn't watch anything that normal people watch. I'm Josh Hennig here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Great stuff from Paul there. Of course, our Inside the Sixers segment being brought to you today by AmeriSave Mortgage. Lower mortgage rates means more savings. Find out more at AmeriSave.com. Yes, I have more in common with Paul Hudrick than you do.
That is correct. Can't believe you guys don't watch the Kardashians.
Never.
You're missing out. See, I used to be that way, and then I was like, you know what? I'm going to make an executive decision internally. I'm going to sit down and watch this.
You're
Can't
also in a
stop.
long-term committed relationship, and I'm not.
Was she the one that got me into it, or
I
was I the
feel-
one that got her into it?
I feel like she might have suggested it to you.
I don't remember, to be honest. There's a possibility that I allowed for this to happen.
What about Love Island?
Love Island was a little bit of both of us at the same time.
Okay.
We stumbled upon it together, and we whoa, this is fantastic.
Well, listen, maybe that's why you two are so
It-
long-term
it all
committed, because you
started-
guys vibe.
It all started with Jersey Shore. The addiction to Jersey Shore and how phenomenal that television show was. It transformed me into this reality TV show lover.
So Jersey Shore is like a gateway drug.
Yeah, it's so good. If you go back and watch it now, it's on Hulu. It is the fact that is real is hysterical. It really is. No, nothing?
I'm out.
Oh, come on.
Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN. Football at 4 with Geoff Mosher. We'll ask him to choose between the Kardashians and Jurassic World or Park coming up next.
97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with Geoff Mosher.
I think our track record in the last 20 years, how many NFC East titles, playoff appearances, and appearances in the NFC Championship game, those are some of the metrics I look at, and I'll compare our record with almost anybody.
Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. This is Football at 4.
That's right, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Bird podcast. The newest episode dropped this morning. And joining us right now on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline, as he does every Monday here on the Sports Bash. Of course, Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill along with Hunter Brody here on 97.3 ESPN. The one and only Geoff Mosher joins us. Geoff, how you doing this Monday?
I'm doing great, fellas. Hope you guys are well. I think I've been listening to the show, and man, did Hunter bring up a great kind of pros and cons type scenario? Or maybe there was you, Josh, who said that a Kardashian has ruined every man
That was
he's
me.
ever been with. But
That
you
was
have-
definitely me.
Yeah, that was you. You got to ask though, was it worth it though? I mean, they are the Kardashians, and they look good. So you do wonder, like, is it worth giving your life away
No.
and potentially going
Yes.
crazy?
No.
Yes.
For a few years with a Kardashian.
Yes.
No, because they're not the only beautiful women in the world. They are not the only women who are worth dating in the world. There are plenty of beautiful, wonderful women who will not destroy your life.
You tell him, Josh.
Yeah, but you're open. Oh, first of all, that narrows the question down to the obvious. Like, none of us are ever going to date or marry a Kardashian. I mean, some of us, like myself, are already married. But the point is, just to look at it through the prism of you have an opportunity to be with a Kardashian. It doesn't mean that if you say no, Josh, that you get to go be with, Selma Hayek afterward or anything like that. It's simply a question of you have an opportunity to have a relationship with a Kardashian, a once-in-a-lifetime deal there. Do you take it and reap the benefits knowing that the end result will be bad for you, but on the way to that being bad, you may have some tremendous peaks, if you will.
This is
no pun intended.
Yeah, this is exactly what happens when the Eagles don't pull the trigger on Carson Wentz. We are now starting Football at 4 with if we will or should date a Kardashian.
I love it. It's true.
So speaking of
so what do we got
Carson
now?
Wentz, Geoff, he has not been traded as of this moment. I thought an interesting point. I want to bring it up to you. Jeff Darlington was on ESPN Radio this morning and said that he believes that the deadline for the Eagles is March 19th. I find that interesting because Adam Kaplan said that also on Friday that the Eagles have until a certain point where that roster bonus kicks in. So is it fair to say that the Eagles are going to take their time as things look right now to get the right deal?
I think technically, Josh, they have that deadline because it's correct to say that a certain amount of money kicks in for the Eagles that would be guaranteed for them that wouldn't be if they were able to make a trade, and the other team would have to take care of that. However, I don't think that means we should assume that Howie Roseman is fine waiting until that deadline to do it, because you're talking about March 19th, you're talking about free agency, I guess, being underway already at that point by a few days, or maybe going to be a few days afterward. And Carson Wentz is one of several players on the roster, guys, that their futures have to be kind of reconciled here. And there's a lot of moves that the Eagles need to make to become cap compliant, just to become cap compliant. I mean, we've talked about this. This is going to be a crossroads offseason. There's a lot of different players who will either have to have contracts extended to lower their cap numbers, or will have to be sent away in a trade, like potentially Zach Ertz, maybe some other guys. There'll have to be some guys who are cut for cap casualty reasons. So I don't think that you can have this hanging over them for the next month and a half. I honestly think that there is an impetus for Howie Roseman to have to do this sooner than later, so that he can get on with the rest of the roster architecture that he's going to have to deal with.
How do you think the league right now values Carson Wentz? Could we open up the show kind of talking about what else is out there? What other moves can these organizations make if they want to go after a different quarterback not named Carson Wentz? Where do you think he stands compared to some of the other guys available right now?
Well, I think there's no question, Hunter, that there is a certain question mark about what Carson Wentz is going to be going forward coming off of a bad year. I don't think that he's, quote-unquote, damaged goods. I don't think, though, that you're going to get the same kind of Matthew Stafford haul, because even if you compare their numbers and they're somewhat similar throughout their career, the bottom line is Matthew Stafford was not benched, and it wasn't just this last year, and I don't think he's had a year as bad as Carson Wentz just had. So there is a little bit of buyer beware out there with, are we going to be able to get Carson Wentz back to being what he was anytime between 2017 and 2019, somewhere in there. And I think some teams, I think the Colts feel that they have the infrastructure to be able to do that. Obviously, they have Frank Reich there. Obviously, they have Press Taylor there. They have a great offensive line. They have a really good general manager. They have ample cap space to the point where they could bring in Carson Wentz and still make moves to put weaponry around him. And so I'm sure in their offices, they're feeling pretty confident about what they could do to rebuild Carson Wentz if they're able to get their hands on him. But just like every other team, they can't be positive of that. So this is why we're at where we are, because there's certainly, I guess this is the risk-reward deal. There's high risk, there's high reward.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Geoff, when you think about the high risk, high reward, but where does that high risk, high reward compare to other quarterbacks who are available? You have guys out there like Matt Ryan. There's speculation Jimmy Garoppolo is getting traded. Speculation Sam Darnold will get traded. Mitch Trubisky is a free agent. So where does Wentz's high risk, high reward compare to those guys?
Well, just from just speaking to people around the league over the last few years about where Carson, how they viewed Carson compared to other quarterbacks. Certainly, I think he compared favorably to some of those names you mentioned because of the physical tools that he had. Everybody saw in 2018 what he was been able to do. I think that it's fair to say that he is not the same athlete that he was back then because of the injuries that he's had. And so that's why we're talking about him right now and a deal yet to be consummated and the risk that's involved. I do believe, though, that people still look at him as a player with the right tools around him, is an accurate quarterback, likes to drive the ball, can make any type of throw in the NFL, and can lead a team. I still think that he's viewed that way. And, you look at some of the other guys that you mentioned that are out there. Sam Darnold was out there, hasn't really lived up to being a top 5 pick, I think what he was. No playoffs. And obviously there's been not a team built around him that's really good. But I think there's some question marks on what his ceiling is compared to what Carson Wentz's ceiling could be. Marcus Mariota was a starter for a while and did not, really do anything. I think he went to the playoffs once, but he didn't really establish himself as an elite quarterback. He did look good in his short amount of time there, backing up Derek Carr when he had to play. And so there'll probably be some interest in him. Same thing with Garoppolo, a guy who was in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, but obviously very injured last year. A guy who, when he plays well, you can see a lot of talent, but you don't see it consistently, game in, game out, and of course the injuries last year really hurt him. So I don't want to say it's all just a mixed bag because each quarterback has his own strengths and weaknesses here, but I sense that people don't forget that what Carson Wentz was able to do in 2017 and then the way he worked himself back to be ready in 2018. I know there's a lot of debate about Carson Wentz's win-loss record in 2018 and 2019, but his statistics were pretty good. I mean, I think he had passer ratings over 90 in each of those years. And if you even go back to last year, 4,000 yards without a receiver who went 1,000 yards. I mean, he did some things, especially in December there, that make you realize what he can be when he's consistently playing well.
We brought up Zach Ertz in a trade package before. Reports over the weekend mentioned maybe Andre Dillard in a similar package type deal. Have you heard anything about that? And if not, what is your thoughts on that possibility?
So I haven't heard that. Doesn't mean it hasn't been discussed, but I personally haven't heard it. My personal thoughts on that is that I think that they should keep Andre Dillard. I mean, unless he becomes a sweetener for a deal they can't turn up. I mean, the report was what, Zach Ertz and Dillard for something?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to know what that something is, right, in order to really be able to comment on it.
And it even speculated maybe even all three of them, like Wentz, Ertz, and Andre Dillard in the same deal.
Yeah. I mean, if you're talking about getting high for first-round or second-round picks back, maybe I understand that. But to me, I think depth on the offensive line is something that's critical for this team. And although I would say going into OTAs, I think Jordan Mailata should be left tackle for Jordan Mailata to lose. There's no reason why you wouldn't want to have Andre Dillard with all that talent that he does have, at least as your top backup. Maybe you can cross-train him at right tackle, especially if he's not going to be a starter. He has the time then to be cross-trained. I just don't think that you should give up on him just as a throw-in, because for all that we saw his weaknesses, like he needed to get stronger, he needed to get tougher. I know there was question marks about that even going into last year before his injury. It's hard to find a guy with that size and that kind of dancing bear footwork that he had. His pass protection skills, his footwork, especially with speed rushers, not necessarily power rushers, but speed edge rushers, is just not something that you see in guys every day. That's why he was a first-round pick. And I would just like to see Jeff Stoutland have the opportunity to work with him a little bit more, with him being healthy. And it's a bonus that you have Mailata there to be able to play left tackle and Lane Johnson at right tackle. But as we've seen, injuries have really hit this team hard over the last few years. I just think that there's an opportunity there to have a really good backup for depth if he can't crack the starting lineup. So I just wouldn't trade him away for a bag of footballs or anything like that, or a throw-in.
Geoff Mosher joining us here at Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. You can follow Geoff on Twitter at Geoff Mosher NFL. Check out the latest edition of the Inside the Birds podcast that dropped this morning. Mosher and Kaplan on there, getting more into the Eagles coaching staff and more. Geoff, talking about specifically the trade situations, if we could get over to Zach Ertz, there's a speculation out there that Ertz, as Bros mentioned, could be traded with Dillard, could be traded separately, could be packaged with Wentz. What makes Ertz a tradable piece aside from the fact of who he is?
Well, I think what makes him a tradable piece is that, how many really good tight ends who are capable of getting you 800 or more yards and 50 or more receptions are out there. I mean, there's obviously the top 4 or 5, which is Kelsey, which is Darren Waller, which is George Kittle when healthy. Who else am I missing there? I'm sure there's someone who's on that list Mark Andrews from the Ravens. But after the top 5, I mean, there's a pretty big drop-off. Now, if the evaluation on Zach Ertz is that he's not what he was, but he can still get you 40 to 50 catches, 600 to 800 yards, his contract's pretty favorable right now. It's one of the reasons why he's able to be traded. And there are teams that you're seeing more and more are relying on those 2 tight end formations, whether it's the 49ers, whether it's the Ravens, a couple other teams. I think the Patriots, obviously we know that. And all those, I think the Dolphins would probably be into that more with Brian Flores there. There's just teams that like to use 2 tight ends, and one might be a blocker and one might be a pass catcher. I mean, you saw what Trey Burton got from the Bears a couple of years ago as a free agent, and Trey Burton has never had a season anywhere near, to my knowledge, anything that Zach Ertz ever had. Now, maybe that was a mistake by the Bears, but the point is people are always looking to add talent, and I think that Ertz is the type of player that a good established team, not a rebuilding team, like a veteran team that really likes to use the tight ends, could bring in at a pretty decent number there and help fortify the offense as it tries to win a Super Bowl.
When looking at his production last year, do you think that was more because of the physical injury? How much do you think played into the contract situation, knowing that this is coming down to an end, knowing just the dysfunction involved as well? Would you say that maybe that had more to do with it than just the physical side of things?
Yeah, that's a great question, Hunter, because sometimes we've seen that where a guy in a bad mindset or a bad situation mentally where he's at, his environment impacts the play. Because when I watched tape of Ertz last year, I remember thinking he looked a little bit slower, he looked less dynamic, something wasn't right there. I mean, there were times he was open and Carson Wentz didn't see him as much, so that was on Carson too. But there were also just times where he looked like he was not the polished route runner and the guy who just knows how to get open in every situation that he used to be. But that was early, and then he got hurt, so that marred a lot of his season last year too. There's what talent evaluators and scouts and people who watch tape would have to decide is, did they see something that is so alarming that they feel he's not even anywhere near what he used to be, or are they able to kind of understand the environment, the circumstance, the unhappiness, and be able to kind of project that and say, we think in our culture with maybe either a new deal or something done, a better situation around him, that he will look a little bit more dynamic than he was the year before when he just was clearly going through some things, because he's not that old and tight ends can play in this league for quite a while. We've seen Antonio Gates and Tony Gonzalez and several other guys, Heath Miller. I mean, guys play for a while at that position. There's really no reason why Zach can't still be a really effective tight end. He may not be a 70 catch 1,000-yard guy anymore, but he should still be a pretty good tight end.
Geoff Mosher joining us, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Of course, every Monday and Wednesday, Geoff joins the show here on 97.3 ESPN. Adam Kaplan on Fridays. Andrew Duchecka will be in here tomorrow with Mike Yell back in tomorrow here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig filling in on the Sports Bash. Geoff, one of the things also this offseason we got to figure out for the Eagles, because with the new coaching staff, you and Adam talked about this on the podcast, how does everything fit in with the new offense and defense? So if we're going to assume that Zach Ertz is gone, if we're going to assume Carson Wentz is gone, what does the offense look like going into 2021 without those guys in it?
Well, I think, and something Adam and I addressed, is that this has to be the year that you see development and elevated play out of wide receivers. There's no question about it. And I even went as far to say it becomes a referendum on the entire organization, from their talent acquisition to their coaching to their development overall, if wide receivers do not take a step up. First of all, you look at Nick Sirianni, the new coach. He was a wide receiver, right? So, I mean, that's his pedigree. That's his position. Kevin Patullo, that he brought in as his pass game specialist, was a quarterback to start off his high school and college career and then moved to wide receiver. So he's played wide receiver in college. And Aaron Moorhead, retained from the prior staff, played wide receiver for the Colts for a couple of years in the NFL. That's 3 guys on the offensive staff who have played the position. And I said, that reminds me of when Carson Wentz got drafted, and he had 3 guys. He had Frank Reich, he had John DeFilippo, and he had, of course, Doug Peterson, like that quarterback cocoon that we all talked about. So if this coaching staff can't make these wide receivers play better, more consistently, you can't have a 4-game stretch like Travis Fulgham have and then completely disappear. If they can't get these guys tap into the speed that John Hightower has and Quez Watkins, and certainly maybe they might draft a wide receiver or 2 as well. If they can't develop this wide receiver position, then maybe these aren't the right coaches, and certainly you'll have to continue to come down on Howie Roseman for being the one who brings these wide receivers in, and question everything about it, because the environment should be one in which wide receivers here flourish. And if you listen to Nick Sirianni, his philosophy, what he's said in videos before, is to try to get the ball in the hands of his most dynamic playmakers within 5 to 10 yards. He likes to get these guys over the middle, in space, so that they can make yards after the catch, and he likes to design schemes that enable him to do that. So if none of this, if we're talking at the end of the year about the wide receivers being a failure, then it's a failure on both the coaching staff and the people who are responsible for acquiring wide receiver talent.
Something Adam brought up to us on Friday was the lack of assistant positional coaches. How do you view that?
I don't think that's in some cases, I think it's a big deal. Like, take the secondary. There's a lot of, you're going to go into camp and you're going to have like 6 cornerbacks and 7 safeties. Of course, they're not all going to make it, but that's how many you have before you whittle it down. Right now, you have 1 defensive backs coach, and that's Dillard Wilson, right? Dillard Wilson from the Jets, who came over to be the defensive backs coach here. Jay Valai was supposed to be the assistant, and I assume one was going to handle safeties, the other would handle corners. And now that Jay Valai has left for his 4th job in about 3 months, they have yet to say that there's going to be an assistant at that position. Well, that's a lot of pressure on Dillard Wilson to have 13 or 14 defensive backs in training camp and have to be coaching them all. In other positions where there's not as many guys, tight end, running back, I don't think it's as essential.
Geoff, before we let you go, I got to ask you the question that we kind of started with, and we got to end with it. So the reason why the Kardashian thing came up was because Paul Hudrick was wearing a Jurassic Park shirt earlier today. I complimented him on it. It was revealed that Broads has never seen any of the Jurassic movies at all. So I ask you, whose side are you on? Are you on with me and Paul that, Jurassic Park, Jurassic World, or with Broads who says, keeping up the Kardashians, Love Island, etc.?
Yeah, sometimes I want to give Broads a free pass because I have to be reminded that a lot of things that were awesome in my life happened at a time where Broads was like either in the womb or still in diapers. So I can't maybe expect him to have had the same experience that I had. But then I step back and think, you know what? I wasn't alive when the Godfather trilogy came out, and I still seen it. I wasn't alive when certain movies in the 70s that were, or even 60s were really popular. Any of those Christmas movies that everybody watched, but I've seen them. So I can't excuse Broads for not at least seeing Jurassic Park and understanding how significant that movie was when it came out, to what special effects were and changing the kind of the cinema. I don't want to say changing the game. Obviously, Star Wars helped do that, but it just took it to another level. They created living, walking, breathing dinosaurs, and nobody had ever seen that on screen before.
Yeah, but Moshe, you're forgetting. You are totally just disregarding Snooki being hammered at the bar and JWoww having to go pick her up, bring her back to the smush room to make sure she was safe. There's so much you're missing out on from Jersey Shore perspective that I don't think you're doing it, you're not doing it right.
That's poison, man. That stuff is brain poison.
Exactly. Thank you, Geoff.
That's your problem. You've been poisoned by that stuff. Just straight trash, man. Trash. You should be ashamed of yourself.
Straight trash, homie.
I only saw the first 2 seasons.
He speaks from knowledge then. He knows intimately how much trash it is. There you go.
I used to actually have a beach house in Belmar, which was, back in my 20s, and which was not Belmar, South Jersey, Belmar, which is right next to Seaside Heights. So I know all about those places that they were hanging out, unfortunately.
Yeah, just so you know, Geoff, Broads asked me what I was watching late at night, and I explained to him my lineup. And his next question was, how much wine did I have? And that's where that conversation went. So.
Yeah, nobody really should be comparing their habits to you, Josh. No offense. You're a one-of-a-kind type of person, too.
I take that as a compliment. How about that?
Sure.
Geoff, I appreciate the time and entertaining us as well.
No problem, guys. Have a good one.
Geoff Mosher, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. The latest episode dropped this morning. Of course, you got the next episode on Thursday morning, every Monday and Thursday morning on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, Football at 4 being brought to you by Dr. Lyle M. Back. For everything from skincare to cosmetic surgery, go to ilovelylback.com or call 856-MAKEOVER for Dr. Lyle M. Back, proud sponsor of Football at 4 here on 97.3 ESPN. Broad, thoughts?
I think that he's ridiculous. I think you're ridiculous. And I think Jersey Shore is fantastic television. Those are my thoughts.
I've never watched an episode of Jersey Shore.
Well, see, now that's where I have the problem.
And nor will I.
See, you can't see, I don't say Jurassic Park is bad. I say I don't see it. For you to say Jersey Shore is bad and not even see it, that's where I have the problem.
I'm with Geoff. It's just trash television.
But you haven't seen it.
But I don't need to see it to know what it is.
Couple bottles of wine and Snooki, now that's some entertainment.
Listen, it's not like Snooki's sitting with me watching the show, okay? That'd be different.
Yeah, you got a fair point.
Listen, if I had a young lady watching something with me, that's one thing. I'm not going to sit down and voluntarily
But
watch
you
it.
still wouldn't enjoy the if you don't enjoy the show, you're not going to enjoy the show. So you're telling me if you're with a female, now all of a sudden the show becomes more entertaining to you?
Well, there might be some conversational value that goes along with it.
Oh, there's no doubt there is.
Like we might have some psychological analysis going on of what I'm watching on the television. Then it's really less about the show than it's about the conversation with the person.
Yeah, that's fair, and I absolutely acknowledge that. The other side of it is I have that conversation with myself when I'm watching it alone. So I still have that conversation. It's just solo.
By the way, Chris Dunn on YouTube watching the show at 973 ESPN says that's a crime. No Jurassic Park, no excuse, bro.
There's billions of classic movies that I've never seen, and I'm fully okay with it. I don't watch I don't watch movies. Movies are they're a waste of time for me. Waste of time.
He's Hunter Brody, doesn't watch movies. I'm Josh Hennig, who does watch movies, here filling in for Mike Gill on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN.
Now, back to the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN.
Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill. 4 o'clock hour of the Sports Bash being brought to you by Prop Swap. That's right, Prop Swap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bet and take your profit. Find out how at PropSwap.com or by downloading the Prop Swap app today. 609-403-0973 is the text for to get on the conversation. Also, people watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter watching the show. Chris Dunn followed up on his comment about Jurassic Park. He said, South Park had the greatest Jersey Shore episode ever. They had been live to the Jersey Shore cast. That was actually pretty funny.
I think I've seen that clip. Yeah. I did see the clip going around before. Pretty funny.
I feel like South Park, now this may offend some people. So South Park is funny, but it's not as funny as the diehard South Park people like to say it is. It's funny, but let me be realistic with you. I don't watch every South Park episode, but I guarantee you certain South Park episodes fall flat.
No, I agree with you. I think that is a very good assessment. It's funny. It will make you laugh. It is not to the extreme that the South Park fans make it out to be.
Right. For example, I think that as a whole, for example, I think Family Guy is funnier than South Park as a whole.
No doubt about it.
But because South Park does a lot of parody, some of those episodes are epically hilarious, while other episodes are Meanwhile, Family Guy, I've never seen a bad Family Guy episode.
Yeah, no, the South Park is weird funny to me. It's funny, but it's a weird funny. Family Guy is just hysterical. It's I haven't watched it in so long. Now you almost have my head spinning to the point where I think I need to dive into
Go back and watch some.
Dive into some Family Guy. I might transition from maybe take a break from Love Island season 6 and move on to a little Family Guy just for a little break.
I approve of this choice.
Okay, just for maybe a day or two.
By the way, Jeff Bone and Pookie chimes in. I'm gonna go overthrow the Empire and destroy the Death Star. Y'all need anything? Yeah. Can you bring me some speed cruisers? Bro says no clue what we're all about. So
Star Wars.
Yeah, Star Wars.
There you go.
At least you had
I don't live under a rock. I mean, I'm aware of this stuff. I just don't watch it. What I do watch, though, is UFC 258.
Yes, you did. So did I.
Yeah, so my takeaways. It was an okay card.
Okay.
I think it's in between two fantastic cards. When they showed 259, I almost fell over.
I know. You texted me. You're like, oh, my. You were freaking out.
Yeah, look at that card.
Yeah.
But I thought the Usman-Burns fight, at first, the first round, when you saw Burns give a good right hook, how do you do? And Usman stumbled. I was like, hold on, are we in for a treat? And then Usman kind of made the adjustment. The jabs came into play. Didn't fall into what Burns wanted him to do, which was get on the ground and those jabs and switch into southpaw and all that. That was the difference. But I did think for a moment there, hold on for a second, do we have a treat? But no, domination occurred. And I thought it was entertaining, though. What were your overall thoughts on the main fight, the main event?
I thought the main event was everything you would hope it would be. It had a roller coaster of emotions. It had drama. You didn't have a guy just like dominating the whole fight. He had showed a champion's heart. He overcame adversity. He figured out how to get through the situation. I love the fact that he dominated with his jab. I love the fact that Burns said, "Come to the ground." He's like, "Nope, not doing that, because I know I'm not putting in a position for you to beat me. I'm dictating the terms of this fight." The moment that Burns said, "Come to the ground," and Usman said no, I was like, Usman's winning this fight.
Don't you think that Burns should have had, and maybe he did and it failed, but should have had an adjustment if he doesn't commit to getting on the ground, what do I do? It was almost as if, I don't know, did he have a backup plan? You would think that there is a backup plan.
That's part of the problem, because Usman left their camp for this fight. He said, "Burns, you can stay at our camp, but I'm going to go to Trevor Whitman." And Trevor Whitman's a master strategist. He's one of the best strategists in all of MMA. So that guy went to Usman and said, "Here's the game plan. Here's plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D." And you know what they did? They went from plan A to plan B. They needed to go to plan C because Burns didn't have a plan B, plan C.
Now, with Burns afterwards, he was clearly emotional.
Yes.
For me, I'll be honest with you, maybe this is me being outrageous, but I thought it was a little too emotional. It's like, yo, dude, you got popped. You lost to Usman. All right, you lost. It's not like you lost to some nobody. You lost to Usman. Now, I understand that he felt like this was his moment, he lost his moment. He had the chance, and he missed the opportunity. But I did think that there was almost too much emotion into it, too much crying for my liking. Now, that just shows you how much he cares and he's passionate. But I thought it hit the line. It passed the line of too much crying.
Well, here's part of the reason why, all right? If you remember my conversation with Usman, when I said to him, "Hey, you're 33, but you're not an old 33, okay? You're not someone who's been fighting for a super long time." Burns is a year older than Usman, and he has way more fights on his resume. There's a party that has to wonder, did Burns view this as his best shot at the UFC gold? Not saying he can't bounce back, but was a part of the reason why he was emotional maybe was because he says that the light at the end of the tunnel is coming faster than I wanted to admit.
And I think that's the answer is yes. I think we can all kind of watch that and say, yeah, the answer is probably yes. He saw that as the chance. And because it was that premier chance and he fell short, that he was disappointed about it. I was almost questioning because Usman landed some really good punches when he was on the ground there. And I was just wondering, maybe he was out of it, as if he was just out. He was blacked out almost, and maybe he wasn't aware that he was that emotional.
Maybe not. Maybe there was a part of him that was separated from the moment emotionally. I'm not going to hold it against him.
No. Look, I was entertained by the fight. You saw. What were your thoughts, though, when you did see him land that right to stumble Usman? Did you think there was a chance here? I mean, you've watched a lot where you realize the swings can happen, and these fighters can find a way to regroup themselves after something like that. But for Usman to get clocked that early on, that's pretty shocking to most watching.
So to me, as someone who watches as much as I do and has observed the sport, to me, there's a huge difference between stumbled on your feet and you get knocked to the ground. The fact that he didn't get put flat on his rear told me that he was still in the fight. Now, if Burns would have popped him a few more times and he's still wobbly, then I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. But a couple of those shots, it's not a fight. Like, for example, famously or infamously, depending on what side of you were when the fight went down, years ago when Frankie Edgar had his wars with Gray Maynard. And Gray Maynard had this one shot where he blasted him in the face. And Frankie Edgar goes backwards and he does a somersault to get himself back onto his feet. But you were like, whoa, like he got hit so hard he had to do a somersault to get back on his feet. You were like, well, wait a minute, something's going on here. And then Edgar kind of like Gray Maynard gassed himself out and he came back. That is one thing. I never saw a moment where Usman was completely in trouble. Like he was staggered, he was stumbled, the power really shook him. But it was kind of like almost like a woke up the cobwebs a little bit.
Yeah, like a quick stun, but not a major stun. And
it was kind of like when you played hockey. Maybe you're lollygagging through the first period, then you get hit into the boards, and you shake your head like, all right, I'm in the game now.
Yeah, it gets you focused for sure. And even Usman mentioned that afterwards, that a lot of that shot he took, he said a lot of people would probably be knocked out after that one. And, he's going to say that because he thinks of himself very highly. But What did you think of the Masvidal call-out afterwards? Do you think Masvidal is the next good fight? The last time they fought, he had about 6 days to prepare for it, and it wasn't much of a contest. What is next for Usman? Do you think that it was the right move to call out Masvidal?
It was the right move because he had to call out somebody.
It'll sell, don't you think?
So here's the thing. When you go through the UFC rankings right now, the majority of the guys who are ranked highly are all guys that Usman has already beaten. And that's part of the problem for any fight promoter when it comes, I'm just saying a general principle, any fight promoter when it comes to trying to shape the future of selling fights. You got to have a sellable fight. And the problem is that nobody wants to see a rematch with Burns anytime soon. We want Burns to go find himself again and then work his way back up. Nobody is really interested in seeing Leon Edwards, even though he probably deserves a chance. That's not going to sell anything. But Covington and Masvidal are going to sell. And when Usman called out Masvidal, that was his way of saying, I'm here to sell fights. You got to promote yourself. You got to sell yourself. You got to give the audience a reason to tune back in. And we all know that, that incident happened down in Miami last Super Bowl week when Masvidal and Usman were chirping at each other, and then the fight eventually happened. And as you've mentioned, look, that wasn't the most exciting fight for Usman in the world. It's not like he went out there and dominated. He just leaned on him and stomped on his foot half the time. I think there's a part of Usman and Masvidal who both want to show that they are more than that result.
That pay-per-view did 1.3 million pay-per-view buys. Would you anticipate that going up or around the same thing? You think even higher?
Because if you have time to promote it and build it up, then you're going to get more buys.
Who was supposed to fight Usman that week?
Supposed to be Burns.
Oh, that was the Burns one that got canceled.
Because
Correct.
Burns tested positive for COVID.
That's right.
And they wouldn't let him fly to Abu Dhabi at all. So Masvidal was the only guy who had tested clean and was available on short notice. Because what he did is he says, I'm going to keep training. I'm going to keep testing in the system. So if you need me, I'll be there. And it was just on Usman to sign off on it at that point.
Yeah, that's correct. Because there's been a couple of times they tried to get this Burns-Usman fight
Right.
down.
This was the third time. So the first time was Burns tested positive for COVID last summer. They tried again in December. Then Usman had what is speculated as a shoulder injury. We don't know for sure what kind of injury, but it was some sort of injury he had to pull out for. And then they rescheduled it for this past weekend. They finally got the fight to happen.
Now, I've been here for 2 years, right? Here at 97.3 ESPN. Are you impressed with the UFC growth here? Like, look at us. Here we are talking the main card, the main event. Here I am after every event. When we talked this morning, you called me before I even got to the studio. We were just talking about some things with the show. And naturally, we just get sidetracked into this UFC conversation. Are you impressed with the jump here? I mean, there was a time, and when it happened, I know where the shift occurred. No sports were on. UFC was the only sporting event live.
And I told you to sit down and watch it.
And I watched it. And that kind of gained my interest in it. But I will say, now that I'm watching some of the older events, I can't wait until I get to experience it with this type of knowledge with it. Not that I'm anywhere crazy, but I'm clearly learning the game and I'm appreciating it more.
You have much more invested now.
Yeah, definitely. But when I go back now and watch fights, because I have the UFC Fight Pass, the fans, man, I really want to see that. Like, I was watching last night because they didn't have anything where they were this past weekend.
Yeah, they were at the Apex.
Right, but prior, when they were on the island, they had fans in there, and even that minor amount made such a difference to my viewing experience.
Oh, it definitely draws a lot of juice. Listen, I was in Philadelphia back, 2011, when it was the main event was Tito Ortiz versus Rashad Evans, two former champions who were coming off of some tough times and were trying to rebound their careers. And even for a fight that didn't have no belt on the line or anything, just a solid, good fight card, the place was electric. When I was in Atlantic City a few years ago, when it was Kevin Lee versus Edson Barbosa was the main event. The co-main event was Frank Yeager versus Cub Swanson. In the prelims, the building was 66% full, and it was loud. And it got even the peak of the loudness when Frank Yeager walked to the octagon. Because Jersey's own, you're in Atlantic City. There is something to be said for the juice of a great event, sporting-wise, whether it's the Super Bowl, a big UFC fight, whatever it may be, the fans make the difference. I agree 100%.
So how would you rate this card, 1 to 10? Because I thought the co-main was okay. I thought the co-main was definitely intriguing enough for my liking. I thought the first fight was good. The co-main and the main event I lived up to expectations, but I wouldn't say it was a great card.
So am I grading it on just the main card? Just the pay-per-view part?
Yes, just the main card.
I would give it a B- because I felt it was top heavy. I felt like that the main event and the co-main event both were payoffs. You know what I mean? You got your money's worth with those, but the other 3 fights, not so much. And I would have liked to have seen. I feel the UFC, as you just said, this was the card before the big card. They could have put another fight on this card to give it a little more juice, but sometimes things don't pan out that way. Sometimes the schedule don't work out the way you always want it. To be the co-main event, I thought that Barber and Grasso lived up to expectations to me. I was talking about that might be the fight that made the best fight on the card, and I think it definitely delivered as well. I did think it was interesting that Macy Barber tried to finish the fight in the third, and she almost did. But Alexa Grasso, she's definitely grown a lot in her fighting skills. We saw Gastelum before that have a dominating performance, get a win. You know, people forget that Gastelum has been a contender for the championship belt, so he's no pushover. But I agree with what your sentiment was. A lot of people said, I saw this online a lot. There is a perception, whether it's real or legitimate, that this was the card before the card, that this was the filler. This was the fight that's going to get you to the super card that is UFC 259 with not 1, not 2, but 3 events, super events on the card. Obviously, you got the champ versus the champ, Adesanya versus Blachowicz. You have the women's fight, Nunes versus Anderson. That's a fight everybody wants to see because Nunes hasn't been really challenged at this point, aside from Shevchenko. And people are hoping that Megan Anderson can be that challenge to her. And then you got 135. You know, the guys who throw punches at 200 miles an hour. It's Jan versus Sterling. By the way, Sterling from North Jersey, New York.
How about that? Now, I do want to throw this your way. I heard a lot about how, and there's 2 ways to kind of look at it. Because there's so many UFC events, that this could compare to like a UFC fight night card, this past 258. This could be equivalent to a UFC fight night card and not so much a pay-per-view event. Would you disagree or agree with that?
Because it's pay-per-view is what you're saying.
Yeah.
That the money aspect has an element of factoring.
Right, but the way you can look at it is, if you can relate this to a UFC fight night card, it's almost impressive where the sport has grown that, wow, you're comparing this pay-per-view event to a fight night card. Like, that's pretty impressive to show the growth of the fight night. But it also shows the watered downness of UFC as well. Like, it depends on how you view it, what eye you're using to
right,
look at that.
It's 2 sides
statement.
of the same coin.
Yeah.
You're giving people the content. You're giving people the fights. You're giving more fighters opportunity to make money, but then you're also not always drawing everybody in for every fight card. And I think that does have an element of, like you said, watered down at times. But I think overall, the UFC's in a good place overall.
Oh, no doubt.
I just think that, like you said, the growth effect, people are actually interested in the fight nights and the pay-per-views is a big deal. I think it also helps the fact that ESPN is promoting it and Fox before it. You know, before UFC went to Fox and now ESPN, they were on Spike TV.
Yeah.
You know, and let's be realistic. Unless you were a diehard, you looked at Spike TV, whatever. Pay-per-views had to be a super card for you to even care. Now, people are invested. You know who the fighters are. You know who the events are. You know who the players are. You have more invested and interest in it because of the monster promoting it that is ESPN.
As much of a UFCsman as I am, I will say, I'm not diehard early prelim guy yet. I still need to work on that. Are you every single prelim fight guy where you watch every single prelim fight for these main events, for these main cards, or no?
I mean, I'm watching no matter what, but I will admit there are days that it might not be on the main screen.
Okay.
Some of the fights, I do admit, I'm not always 100%
I find myself
invested.
tuning in at 10. Like, I find myself being the guy where it's like, okay, the main card is starting.
Like,
I'm throwing it on at 10 o'clock.
So I used to be the guy who watched every prelim. I used to be. And now, because of where the sport has gotten to, there are some of the prelims I'm just not as interested in. I'm really not. I'll watch, on the big screen, I'll watch an NBA game, or I'll watch Serena Williams at the Australian Open, or I'll have something else on the big screen because that fight just, I know what it is. It's filler.
Yeah.
It's a fighter being given an opportunity to get a fight and make a name for themselves. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm sorry, even as a diehard that I am, I can't be interested in every single fight. Just like when it comes to hockey, you're not watching every single hockey game as intently as other games.
Right, like if the Ducks were playing the Kings and it's midnight, that's probably just background noise that I'm falling asleep to. That's similar to the prelim fight for you.
Some of them, yeah. And by the way, main event fights too. There are some main event fights that I'm just like, I'm not doing much.
I would never. Not me. I'm a little surprised by that statement out of you. Some main events are like, eh?
They're not main event, main card fights. Like, the second or third fight on the main card might not have the juice.
Right. No, I can get behind that.
Main event, I'm always there.
Yeah, I'm like, hold on a second.
Like,
You're not watching the main event here.
No, the two fights before, I might not be fully in.
No, that's fine. I can get behind that. I can.
He's Hunter Brody. I'm Josh Hennig here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Yell along with Hunter Brody live in the Matt Black Kia studios on 97.3 ESPN. Yes, Matt Black Kia. They want to get you approved today. That's Matt Black Kia in the Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township. Visit them online at mattblackkia.com. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. If you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, you can chime in on the show as well on there. Just follow 97.3 ESPN. Of course, we have been talking throughout the show Eagles, Sixers, UFC 258, and more. So we have a lot to get to and a lot to recap. And yes, we don't want to overlook the fact that Vincent Jackson has passed away at the age of 38, NFL receiver. According to reports, he was found earlier today, and they're assessing it. So thoughts and prayers go to his family. At 38 years old, there's a possibility he might have been murdered. So the way things are looking, if you go by the reports online right now. So we did not want to overlook that, but that is something that is out there. On a slightly happier note, the situation with the Eagles, as you may know, still no trade of Carson Wentz at this moment in time. But as we talked about earlier, it might not be coming exactly immediately either, bros. And I wanted to run it back with, this was Jeff Darlington earlier today on ESPN Radio. He's talking about two different things with Mike Greenberg. But one was about the timeline, about, getting Stafford-type compensation, right? And this is what Jeff Darlington, who covers the NFL, had to say. It might help if I actually turn down the music. There we go. All right. Here we go.
So for me, when it comes to Wentz, I just don't think if they're expecting to get the same amount of compensation that that's going to happen. That being said, I do think it eventually gets done. And to lay out the timeline here, March 19th is the deadline for them to have to pay Wentz $10 million of an offseason bonus. It's got to happen before March 19th.
So those are two different conversations, and we had this a little bit earlier. We'll bring it back here on the Sports Bash. Started with the show with this, bros. We'll run it back here for the folks out there who are just tuning in this point in the show. So there's two different questions to be had. Number one, what is Carson Wentz's value in terms of a trade? And number two, if the idea is that this will be done before March 19th, that's still more than 30 days away from now that we may have to wait for this trade to get done.
I do think it's going to take some time. And I want to tie that to what we heard just a couple weekends ago with Adam Schefter, right? There were all these reports that it was close. I think something happened. Do you disagree with me? And then that was also around the time of hearing something about the Bears and whatnot. I feel, and this is the way I'm putting the puzzle pieces together.
Sure.
I think that there was something probably really close between the Eagles and maybe the Bears, and then something happened where it then changed, and now we are in this spot. I don't think it's just ironic. I think that there was something there where you have big-time national Adam Schefter-type reporters claiming it is close, and it will happen in the next couple of days, and that Bears report and a few people throwing that out there, and then now it's silence. Maybe there was a disconnect somewhere between both parties.
So I'm like you. I'm piecing things together. So here's where my mind goes. The original report was 5 teams were interested. Then the next report was 2 of the 5 teams are the Colts and the Bears. Then I'm just going chronologically in my mind. Then the next report was that the Broncos might be a dark horse. So now we're starting to get reports about teams, right? The next step of the process was, well, the Eagles are looking for a Stafford return. Now, what was the next step? The next step was people were starting to rumor who was coming from Chicago. Tariq Cohen, David Montgomery, etc. Then that's when things started dying down all of a sudden. And you have to wonder, were the Eagles insisting on getting a player in return for Wentz? And maybe that's what maybe blew the deal down. And then we get the report. Remember, it was 2 second-round picks and maybe a third and a fourth. Then the report came out that an NFL team said, we offered more than that for the Eagles. So now you're starting to wonder, is the Eagles just waiting out the market? Because maybe teams went to the Eagles and said, here's our best offer. The Eagles are like, look, we want to make this deal, but we're not ready to make it for that price. The other team said, all right, well, we'll get back to you. And maybe that's why we're sitting here where we are today, because what happened over the past weekend, you know whose name popped up? Sam Darnold. And that's why I brought him up earlier in the show. I think teams are shopping right now. Teams that need quarterbacks are shopping to see what's available. And because the Eagles weren't going to just pull the trigger immediately, now teams are going out there saying, all right, is Wentz our best option? I think that's a big reason why we are sitting where we are on February 15th.
Another conspiracy theory could be, did the Eagles leak information to try and get the news out there with that Bears possibility of the first-round pick, Tariq Cohen, to somewhat set that as the market? There's been so much involved with Howie Roseman leaking stories over the last handful of months that everyone is fully aware of. All these beat reporters and people who cover the team, they're pretty damn open about it. There is leaked information happening left and right out of the NovaCare. So there is a side of me, while I think that, like, I see it both ways. I could see a scenario where they were super close with the Bears and then something happened that fell through where now we are in the position we are in. I also could see the conspiracy theory of that was leaked info to try and set the market somewhere. And then because it was, you think you're getting a first-round pick for Carson? Now it's died down because, oh, well, we're not giving them a first round, so let's go into another direction. And then that's when you mentioned the shopping. Maybe that leak forced other teams to look in another direction. So I could see both of these playing out.
I think, though, because teams are shopping, they are going to come back to the Eagles. Because, again, I gave you guys the list earlier in the show, all right? So if we take out the rookie quarterbacks, as you said earlier, so take the rookies in the draft out, here is the full list of quarterbacks who are supposedly available via trade or free agency. Deshaun Watson, Matt Ryan, Sam Darnold, Carson Wentz, Jimmy Garoppolo, Mitch Trubisky, Ryan Fitzpatrick, and Cam Newton. Of that list, I would say that most people believe only 2 or 3 of those guys will get you more value than Wentz. Watson probably is going to get you the most bang for your trade. You're going to get at least 3 first-rounders for him. Matt Ryan, you're probably getting a first-round pick for him. Sam Darnold, probably a first-round pick for him.
Do you think so?
I think so. I think, well, it depends.
I don't know. I honestly, if you ask me what do you think his trade value is, I honestly don't know. I don't know if it's as high as a first.
Well, maybe it's the same as Wentz. Maybe it's 2 second-round picks.
I would tend to lean it's probably more that than a first. Now, would I take a shot on that? I wouldn't say it's egregious if at the end of the day, Sam Darnold's moved for 1 first-round pick. Do I think that's crazy? No, it's not crazy, but I do think that's probably more on the higher end than it would be the middle ground.
Well, that's why I asked earlier, what is Wentz's value? You can see on the Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter feeds my question, what is Carson Wentz's value compared to other quarterbacks available this NFL offseason? I think the big question is him and Darnold right now. Because as you said earlier, only certain teams are going to trade for Matt Ryan. And only certain teams have the resources to trade for Deshaun Watson. Like, for example, one of the reasons why the Dolphins are a conversation point is because the Dolphins have the 3rd overall pick. And to a lot of people who are covered the NFL, they say that trading Tua, the 3rd overall pick and a future first-round pick for Deshaun Watson is good value.
If you're the Texans, what would you do at quarterback then? Is that Tua's your quarterback, or is that you go get a quarterback with that 3rd pick?
I think Tua is your quarterback. You draft Penei Sewell with the 3rd overall pick, the offensive lineman, and then you bring in a veteran to back up Tua.
How do you feel about Tua, though? Do you think that he's a guy that you would want? If you're an owner of a franchise, you have Tua. Satisfied?
My personal opinion?
Yeah, your personal opinion.
No.
I agree with you. And that's why I wouldn't pull that trigger if I'm Houston.
Now, the problem is there are people who vehemently disagree with us on that. There are people out there who cover the NFL. There are people who are scout. They think Tua can be Drew Brees, basically. They think that's his potential. I didn't like Tua coming out of college because of the injuries. I feel like he's had too many injuries. You saw in Miami, he had 2 different games where he had less than 100 yards passing.
I mean, what does it tell you? And I am the biggest supporter of growing in sports. So because at this age, what I'm about to say happens, it doesn't mean in 5 years, 4 years, that's the case. But when you're in big games and it's 4th quarter and you're getting benched for your backup just to come in just to finish out a 4th quarter, it's not a great sign.
No, it's not. And I think that I think the reason why you're in this situation, now, my personal opinion, I think Tua should have stayed in college another year. He had 1 more year of eligibility. I think it would have done him some good to stay in college another year. I understand why he came out. Coming off the hip injury, the idea is, you know what? You're taking enough of a beating in college. It's time to go to the NFL. Go make your money. And I totally get it. If you're an athlete, you have a chance to make life-changing money, you should make it. I never begrudge anyone doing that. But his development as a quarterback, I think, is a year behind where it should be because of the ankle injuries, the hip injury. And now you see him in Miami. He has these moments where you were like, that's the Tua we thought. And other moments where you're like, ooh, that was rough to watch. So for me, if I'm an NFL owner, I am not personally interested in Tua, but I'm aware that there are others around the league who think this dude is a future superstar.
And that's fair. If I'm putting myself in, I know I threw out to you the hypothetical of you being the owner of a team with Tua, but if I'm right now Houston and I see Deshaun Watson as this guy that I can get a lot of compensation for, I don't know if the 3rd overall pick in Tua would move my needle as much as what I think I can get elsewhere.
Now, part of the problem with all of this also is that the 2 teams that are talked about most for Deshaun Watson, the Jets and the Dolphins, are both trading you a quarterback back. So no matter what, the Texans are probably going to get a quarterback in a trade, unless they trade with a team that doesn't have a quarterback, which at this moment we don't know who that would be. You know what I mean? Like 2 weeks ago, the Bears were rumored to be all in on Deshaun Watson, and that fizzled pretty quickly. Now, I don't know if that's because Houston said we're not trading him yet, or because the Eagles came along and started talking to the Bears and distracted them. I don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if now I'm putting, because you mentioned, getting that quarterback in return, whether it's the Jets or it's the Dolphins. If I'm Houston, those are my only 2 options to get rid of Deshaun Watson. Would I rather have Tua or would I rather have Sam Darnold? I honestly, I don't know if I can.
And that brings us back to the Wentz conversation, because that's why I told you earlier, and people can text in at 609-403-0973 or message us on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can watch the show live at 97.3 ESPN on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Hunter Brody, along with Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN, filling in for Mike Gill on a Monday. He'll be back in tomorrow for the show. I'm starting to wonder, is Wentz getting traded as a multi-team deal because you're not going to be able to make the deal straight up with one team? Is this a situation where Wentz ends up in, let's say, Houston, or ends up in New England, or ends up in Minnesota, or ends up in Chicago, or ends up in Indianapolis or Denver as part of a multi-team deal, because none of these teams can actually make a one-on-one deal because of the complexities that are going into these trades?
I think it's something that has to be ruled into the conversation. I also feel, though, that maybe this Ertz, Dillard, Wentz package or something of that nature would be more of a reality than that. I feel maybe instead of a 3-team trade and this guy's going here, that like an NBA type of deal, I think a more realistic approach would be maybe packaging up some more guys in an Ertz and a Dillard. Now you're getting a left tackle, a tight end, and Carson Wentz, and maybe that's what pushes the pile more than a three-way trade, if you will. But I'm not ruling that out by any means.
Well, well, let's go down that road for a hot second. Let's say the package is Wentz, Ertz, and Dillard to somewhere for something with Wentz. Those three guys. I'm only doing this as speculation. I'm not doing this as reporting. I'm not reporting anything, folks. Speculation time. Okay? Put that hat on. Is that a deal that's going to get you the best return? Because you're saying, look, we're going to find a way, but you got to accept Wentz's money. But like Brock Osweiler a few years ago, we're going to give you a valuable piece or two in return to kind of make taking him on more worth your time, like they did with Geoff with the Lions, and saying, we'll give you 2 first-round picks and Jared Goff. Is that maybe what we're thinking about with Dillard and Ertz, to say you're bringing those guys as part of the deal to make the deal more worth taking?
Possibly. But if that's what it takes, is that what you're going to have to do? And
Sure.
Yeah.
If that's what it takes. I mean, and the reason why I asked that question is because look at an organization like Chicago. They are not a quarterback away from winning a championship. I think we all know that. Allen Robinson's a free agent. There's a lot of speculation he's going to leave in free agency. Their tight end situation is a mess. Their offensive line situation is very questionable. So what you're doing is you're giving them a quarterback. You're giving them a tight end who can be a primary receiver. You're giving them a left tackle offensive lineman who has at least shown you he can play in the NFL, even though he's coming off of an injury. Is that the way to get Chicago to stay in the game? To stay in the negotiation game and see what Chicago is now willing to offer you in return, because you know that a team like the Colts, they're not interested in Dillard, right? But maybe they're interested in Ertz. So maybe you start going to these teams and saying, well, you want Wentz and Ertz, but they want Wentz and Dillard and Ertz. And then you throw in a team like Denver, they don't need a tight end, but they might like to have Dillard. So maybe to Denver, it's Wentz and Dillard. And now you start changing the dynamics of the phone calls you're having from just being, what are you offering for Wentz, to now being, well, now we're going to really leverage people against each other.
And I'm looking at it from, okay, if the reports right now, let's say, because Geoff said this, right? He said that the best offer he heard was 2 seconds and a third or fourth down the road.
And supposedly that's from the Colts.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's from the Indianapolis Colts. So if you're Howie and you package Ertz and Dillard in with Wentz, what is your return? It's got to be something better than 2 seconds and a third. You know what I mean? Now it's, okay, now I got to play the PR type of move of what can I now get if I throw them in there that doesn't make me look like I got fleeced. If people know that this is on the table for just Wentz, that package can't be 2 seconds and 2/3, because we know you could have got rid of just Wentz, in theory, for 2 seconds and a third. So what more can you get adding them in, or is it the same deal? Because if it's the same deal, then you can't throw those guys in.
Well, also, let me ask you this question. Was that information given to Jaws to further along the trade market?
Right, similar to what I said about information being leaked about the Bears. Now you're just throwing that this way.
Right, because now I'm saying, if I go back over my list here, if the quarterbacks available are Watson, Ryan, Darnold, Wentz, and Jimmy G for trades, those are the 5 tradable quarterbacks as of this moment. I'm not including Rodgers or Wilson, because I think those are just pipe dreams. I think that's not actually going to happen. I mean quarterbacks we actually think could be traded. I would assume that if Wentz's value is 2 second-round picks, that will dictate the rest of the market. So now, if you're the Bears calling, let's say, the Jets, or you're the 49ers making a call, or you're the Denver Broncos making a call, does now knowing that Wentz is 2 second-round picks, does that hurt other teams' ability to maybe get as much as they want for their quarterbacks?
I would think so. Absolutely. I would think the Jets would look at that and go, all right, well, how does this impact us now? If Wentz is going for 2 seconds, what would Sam Darnold get? Would that change how you feel about him? If Carson Wentz went first, Josh, and he ended up going for 2 seconds, do you think Sam Darnold goes for a first?
Maybe a late first instead of a mid first, for example. Remember I told you where the pick is matters as well.
Definitely.
To me, a high second-round pick and a late first-round pick are almost the same. So maybe Darnold, the original deal was, we're going to give you the 15th pick overall. I'm just throwing out a number. But now someone sees that Wentz is getting 2 second-round picks. Maybe a team pulls that pick off the table and says, you know what, Darnold isn't worth that if Wentz is getting 2 second-round picks. So now maybe the Eagles are actually damaging the quarterback market for some of these other teams looking to trade their quarterbacks.
Well, we thought the same with Stafford and Goff, but I don't think that really impacted the market too much. Would you agree with me?
It's funny you said that because that's the other thing that Jeff Darlington talked about earlier today on ESPN Radio with Greeny.
I understand people want to lump Goff and Wentz into the same bubble, but we're still talking about, I don't know. To me, there's a difference in the sense that the Eagles organization, moves in a different direction with their coach. The Rams were getting rid of Goff in a sense because he wasn't working with McVay.
Great minds think alike.
So realistically, what I think Darlington, who covers the NFL insider, Jeff Darlington from ESPN, his theory is you can't compare Wentz and Goff situations. That the Goff-Stafford trade is an outlier, basically, is what I'm getting from it.
I would agree with that. Now, I want to throw something the other way because we just said if Wentz goes first, what happens to Darnold? If Darnold goes first and gets a mid-first-round pick for it, does that improve Carson Wentz's value?
I think so.
So what if Darnold goes for mid-first, one mid-first, what then do you think the ceiling of a Wentz deal would be?
A first and a second.
Okay.
I think
bottom, right. But you're probably thinking of what? Like the Colts 20, they pick 21st? Or the Bears pick 21st? One's 20 and one's 21. Regardless, they're in the same boat, this Colts and Bears pick. So you believe that it can be a first and second. Now, what if Darnold goes for what if he screws up the market? What if you get a high second-round pick for Darnold?
Then Wentz's value doesn't go up at all.
Right. Would it stay the same, though?
It might stay at the 2 second-round picks.
That's probably where I don't think it would go down
so
further than that.
The Bears have 20, the Colts have 21. So what if it's – I'm just throwing out a team right now, okay? What if it's a team like Chicago that goes out and gets Darnold?
With the 20th.
With a 20th pick. So if you're the Colts, you basically have the same pick.
Yeah.
So now, are you really going to tell me that Wentz is that much worse than Darnold?
Well, that's a good way to put it. If you're telling me, let's put ourselves back in the franchise owner mode. If you are an owner of a franchise and you can trade your first-round pick, and both players will be there on your team, and both owners you're talking to, GMs, they agree with it. So you have a first-round pick at the 20th mark. You can either get Wentz right now after his downfall or Sam Darnold right now. Who are you utilizing that first-round pick on? Carson Wentz or Sam Darnold?
If I had to choose one?
Yes.
I mean, I said this on my show on Saturday, and I got to stay consistent. I would lean Darnold.
Wow.
Just because of the cost. Because I can re-sign him for a lesser number than Wentz is, and he's coming in at a lesser number as well.
What do you think his deal would be, AAV, though? Because at this point, he is a highly drafted player, Sam Darnold is. He is going to be your starting franchise quarterback. While I understand how important that is to get a lesser deal than Wentz would, but how much less would it be? He's still going to get paid. Right. I don't think he's going to sign for anything that's going to be so cheap. It's like, wow, how did you get Sam Darnold for that cheap?
But, for example, I think there's a lot of teams right now who look at the Jimmy Garoppolo contract, for example. And I think that they're all a little scared. Because Garoppolo got this huge contract in terms of bonus money and AAV. And he is, I mean, I think Jimmy Garoppolo is not even in the same category right now as trading for Wentz or Darnold or Ryan.
I would agree.
So, and he's making more money than Wentz is. He's going to make more money than Darnold is, that's for sure. So if you're a team that acquires Darnold, you're not going to give him Jimmy G money. So it's obviously going to be less than that.
But if you are looking at Sam Darnold's ceiling, do you think Sam Darnold's ceiling is higher than Carson Wentz's ceiling, if fixed?
I think it's the same.
You really do?
Yeah.
Wow. Then I think you're just a little bit higher on Sam Darnold's ceiling than I am.
I just don't think it can be more because of the fact of I've seen what Wentz can do already. He can be a guy who carries a team. He can be a guy who can be MVP caliber types talent. I don't think Darnold can do any better than that.
No, but I don't think that Darnold can be that. I think
Okay.
Darnold could be a good quarterback. By no means do I think Darnold stinks and he's a bum. Like, I'm no way, shape, or form going down that road. But I don't know if I look at Sam Darnold and I say, this guy one day can be league MVP. And Carson Wentz was clearly in that category before he fell over. And do I think Wentz is ever going to get to that ceiling again? Probably not. If I'm a betting man, I'm probably going to go down with the mentality of he'll never touch that ceiling again.
Okay.
But I don't know if Darnold will ever have that moment that Carson Wentz did. I don't know if he's even capable of reaching that level at all, ever. And that's not to say
Maybe
he'll
not.
be bad. Right. That's not to say that means you're in trouble by any means.
I just think that Darnold's potential is more than Jimmy G at this point. But I don't know if it's more than Wentz. You know what I mean?
So it's you're almost going with the safer pick.
Right. To me, Darnold is safe. Whereas Wentz is...
You're gambling.
Right.
You're gambling.
Well, all this is gambling. Let's be realistic.
Yeah, but you're gambling more with Wentz.
Yes. Josh Hennig here and Mike Gill here on 97.3 ESPN along with Hunter Brody. We are live on the Matt Black Kia Studios on 97.3 ESPN. Also streaming the show on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter is where you can watch the show. You can watch the show, comment on it here on 97.3 ESPN. Get to your text messages here at 609-403-0973. Also your comments on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We're talking about the Eagles quarterback situation and more here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Mike Gill will be back in on the show tomorrow. He'll be back in here in his regular seat here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. But first, we got to get to the listeners listening out there. We got not one but two people texting in from the Villas today for this show. First start the order that came in. Rich in the Villas says, since we're speculating, would you rather trade players for other players or players for picks? Because I'd rather get players back that we could use now. That's Rich in the Villas.
Well, I think it's very situational, right? It depends on what players, how old they are, their contract situations. I'm not against getting players in return, but I don't know if it's a part of the reason why I think a team wants Carson Wentz is because their team is constructed well. And if you get a player like Carson Wentz, and this isn't the only scenario, but let's use the Colts as an example. Are they going to want to get rid of 3 pieces to get Carson Wentz, and then that now diminishes who they were if they were to acquire Carson Wentz? You know what I mean?
I think for me, it depends on the players.
Definitely.
I mean, Rich in the Villas, he brings up an excellent question, though. Which would you rather? To me, it depends on the player, 100%, because this is not draft day where I'm putting the Seahawks on hold and I'm asking the capologist, what do we need? And she says we need a punt returner, David Putney, right?
Well, they're also in cap hell, so it's got to be cheap players.
Right. I think that if there was something that was worth getting in return, the reason why you want picks, for those who don't understand the full dynamic, is because when you get picks in return, those are players who are very, very cost effective. They're not going to damage you on the salary cap. You can fit them into the salary cap without a lot of too many problems. If you acquire too many players with too many big contracts, it's hard to fit the salary cap. And we know the salary cap isn't going up some massive amount as it going up in the past. This is going to be pretty much almost an entirely flat year when it comes to the cap. It's not going up. You're not getting more space out of the cap. So you got to be careful of what you get back in return for a trade.
With all the holes on this team, would you be against this scenario? Trading down from 6 to pick up another pick. So you're trading down to get another pick. And then trading Wentz, you get 2 second-rounders and maybe a third down the road. Now you have 5 really high premier picks, if you will, to kind of help retool this thing quicker than you would.
So I'm just going to pull up the draft order in front of me really quick.
And keep in mind, of those 5 picks, let's say 3 hit. You know what I mean? You're not going to hit all 5.
Right.
Probably.
So the Eagles have a 6 overall pick. Let's say the Dolphins call me. The Dolphins have the 18th pick in the first round, but they also have a high second-round pick. If they offer me both of those picks for the 6th pick and a player, I'd be interested.
I was going to say and a player, too, because think about making a jump from 18 to 6 with just adding a second-round pick. That wouldn't be enough.
Because realistically, the teams that are lower in the draft that are being talked about right now trading up include the Panthers, but they're trading up 2 spots. They want to go top 5. All right. Another thing that's being talked about trading up is, for example, the Patriots. Maybe the Patriots is a team you can make a deal with because you know they always have a cupboard of picks.
Where are they sitting at right now?
15.
Okay, 15.
So if you know they're at 15 and they also have a high second-round pick, that's because to me, if I'm trading my first-round pick for anything, I'm getting more than another first-round pick.
Oh, no doubt about
I need
that.
either a top 10 pick in the second round that year and or a first-round pick in the next 2 years. Nothing else satisfies me. A top 10 pick is among the highest commodities out there.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It would have to be, their first-round pick in return, whatever that is this season. And then you're going to have to think about the jump that Howie Roseman made to go out and snag yourself Carson Wentz. That took a significant punch. You need to give up a lot to go out and acquire top talent. Now, they're not sitting at 2 where they went to grab Wentz at 6, so there is a difference.
Yes.
But you have leverage with that. And knowing that they need cheap talent and they need good talent, I wouldn't be opposed to stacking up where maybe you have 4 second-rounders, a mid-first rounder, and then you have more opportunity to snag some of these players. And I know that, the people listening are probably like, you're going to miss on those anyway, but it's still the right way to build it. You don't go against the way to do it just because the guy, there's no other way. You want to do what the Rams do? Well, guess what? They can't do that right now with where they're at, so they need to go down this path. Whether you trust Howie or not, this is how you get out from underneath of where you are. This is the way to do it.
And the other thing is you could take those second-round picks and move back up into the first round.
That's true. Yeah, you could. Instead of having 4 second-rounders and that mid-first, maybe you have the mid-first, a late first, and 2 second-rounders.
Right. Like you could trade up, like for example, here are the teams that are 26 and up. Okay? The Browns are 26, Ravens are 27, Saints 28, Packers 29, Bills 30, Chiefs 31, Bucks 32. I can see a scenario where any of those teams would consider trading out of the first round because most of those teams don't have a ton of needs. And maybe they say, the guy we want is not here. We'd rather go get 2 second-round picks. And maybe the guy who is there is someone you want, and you go and get him.
I wouldn't be against that at all. I think everything needs to be on the table right now. Do I think that? See, here's another way to look at it, though. With that 6th overall pick, do you want to try and get too cute? Do you want to try and do something where you're thinking too much? You have the 6th pick. Go out and get a stud. Just go get your stud. So I can see that as well, right? Like you want to go out and get help in the cornerback room? Just go get it. Stop trying to get too fancy, trade down, do this and that. Go get it. So I kind of support both ideas. I support both concepts, but I can see both sides. And, from there, we'll see what they do. But I wouldn't be opposed to knowing there's a talented player there, knowing that there's a good chance he succeeds, whether they play at Alabama, LSU, whether on the offensive side or defensive side. I can see a philosophy of just go get a talented player that you know is going to help your squad out.
609-403-0973 is text board. Also, you comment on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter as you watch the show at 973 ESPN. Another text that came in on the text board. We mentioned from the Villas. Tom from the Villas says, what do you think the Eagles should do with the backup QB after Wentz trade happens? This to me is a fascinating question. This is something I talked about a little bit on my show on Saturday, and I'm glad Tom brought this up again. If you trade Wentz, you're basically saying Jalen Hurts is your starting quarterback on some level, whether he's the bona fide starter competing for whatever the situation is. So Dave Weinberg, for example, has said the Eagles should go get Nick Foles to be the backup quarterback because he understands Philadelphia. He can mentor Hurts. If anybody knows what it means to be a quarterback in Philly, it's Nick Foles. If something happens to Hurts, at least the backup is somebody that you can go get. Now, on the flip side, my argument is if you get rid of the Wentz money and you get enough under the cap, let's say, by getting rid of Ertz, a couple other pieces, the guy I would go out and get is Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Yeah. Because
Fitzpatrick is similar to Foles, except that I think that he has also shown the ability to do the same thing. Be a mentor, come in for the young quarterback. Everyone loves it in the locker room, like Foles. Because maybe you don't want to go back down to the Foles shadow hanging over Jalen Hurts. And you go with a totally different guy to back him up.
I do think, though, just based off of his track record, would that spark a quarterback controversy, though? Could you see a scenario where Ryan Fitzpatrick maybe starts games. I feel he has the type of veteran resume where I don't think it's set in stone that Jalen Hurts is the starter. I could see a scenario where this guy's won big games, right? I mean, this guy has played big moments. We talked about the Dolphins sitting and benching Tua for him. Would that be the same situation of you went out and got Hurts when you had Wentz? Well, you have Hurts. Why are you getting someone to start that controversy again? Is this a similar situation?
I wouldn't think so, but I can see people speculating.
Yeah, to be fair, I don't think it's not as if Jalen Hurts has the Carson Wentz's contract, so it's not the same.
Part of the problem
is at the same time.
Part of the problem with the Tua Fitzmagic issue in Miami is that Fitzpatrick started the year at quarterback, and it was a few weeks in, then they made Tua the starter. In Philadelphia, Hurts would be starting day one.
But what if he goes 0-2 to start the year? You don't think that there would be the outrage of get Fitzpatrick in? This guy went 1-3 last year, and now he's 0-2.
I think you have the same outcry if Foles.
No matter who it is, right?
Yes.
No matter who it is.
I think if it's any veteran backup who people even have any clue who he is.
Well, but here's the thing, and this would be they wouldn't. If it was Mariota, you think people would be banging on the table for Mariota?
Yeah.
What happens when he stinks game one? Although Mariota had a nice little game last season,
yes, he did.
Who got hurt? Derek Carr got hurt.
He came in and almost won the game.
He did. That's right. He drove him downfield.
Multiple times.
That's great, Mariota.
But that's the thing. Like,
You're
there's
right.
all these veterans out there, and you want a veteran to back up your young guy. But I think no matter who the veteran is, there's a contingent of the fan base, whether they're the Wentz people who are still crying over spilled milk, or whether they're people who just love the backup quarterback who are going to pound the table and say, I want the backup when the starting quarterback has problems.
If Nate Sudfeld was the backup, I don't think you'd be getting that. You'd be in a disastrous spot
if Nate Sudfeld is your backup next year. You might as well sell the season.
He's not going to be, but I just think it's funny that would be the one scenario where the people will not be banging on the table.
No, people will ask me, Greg Ward,
unless this is Philadelphia. I wouldn't be surprised.
No, the next guy up then would be Greg Ward for those people.
You're right, Greg Ward.
Greg Ward played quarterback in Houston, don't you know? Come on.
We've been begging for that trick play, and we finally saw it. Thanks, Doug. I'll never forget the one trick play with Greg Ward we were calling for.
Does Sirianni run more trick plays with Greg Ward than Doug Peterson?
It's a great poll question.
I mean, I'm just saying, like, listen, I was one of them. I'm like, you got Greg Ward, use him. Like, every team now this year has had a wide receiver throwing touchdown passes. I mean, Jarvis Landry did it twice this year, right? Odell Beckham did it once. Two guys on the same team, but the Browns did it. You saw the Panthers do it. You saw Washington do it. You saw the Patriots do it twice with, what's his name? Dagnabbit, not Bird, the other guy.
Demir Bird's actually a South Jersey local. Went to Timber Creek High School.
But it's not him.
No, I know. I think it's the Harris, or no?
No, it's the other receiver. It's going to bother me. I got to look
Isn't it crazy that now that Tom Brady's not there, we don't know any of the New England Patriots receivers off the top of our head?
Jacoby Myers.
Myers
is the one who
That's
had
right.
those 3 games where he's throwing touchdown passes and going nuts, and fantasy owners are losing their mind this year. But the one team that had a college quarterback, we're not doing that. It's not in the playbook. And remember Doug got asked about it, it was, well, we got that play in the playbook. We just haven't used it yet. And you're looking around like, why not?
The Doug Peterson play design concept situation, that whole thing confuses me. Because everyone who studies the tape at like an NFL level, like the top studying people who look throughout the league, when you have that type of offensive line banged up to that degree and to lead the league in vertical routes, how do you think that that's a recipe for success? Here's a team that, 1, has a struggling quarterback, 2, don't have a lot of offensive weapons, 3, you have a new offensive line every single game.
Right.
And Doug Peterson wants to run the most vertical routes in the NFL? I mean, it blows my mind how you can sit there and truly think that that's a recipe for success. And when you put that into the conversation right now, I guess it makes sense that when he walked into Jeffrey Lurie's meeting and said, this is what I want to do offensively, that they laughed in his face and kicked him out the door. It's wild.
It is wild.
Miles Sanders not even being used.
Javier Rodriguez, watching the show on YouTube, says, I'm confused at this point on what's going to happen with the draft. I'm seeing mock drafts have the Eagles would go trade for another quarterback. See, that's the problem with the mock drafts, though. It's so early. Like, do you really believe Todd McShay's draft, where he says 4 quarterbacks to be drafted in order, and then an offensive lineman, and all of a sudden the Eagles will have Jamar Chase fall in their lap. I don't believe that for 1 minute. So, Javier, I understand your confusion because, Broads, let's be realistic. These mock drafts, the ones that come out in February are never right. But they're confusing because people, that's the only reference point they have.
I think mock drafts are fun for, similar to what we did earlier in the show with the hypothetical of would you trade Deshaun Watson for Trevor Lawrence. I think mock drafts are fun for barroom conversation. It literally, to me, is the same thing when the season starts. What do? Wins and losses. Why? Because it's just what you do. It means nothing. You will never be right. You will always be wrong, but you just do it because it's the start of football season. With the draft,
Don't tell Billy Schwein that because every year he holds my win-loss
he
record
does the same thing for me.
from May
Yeah,
over my head.
I know.
Well, you said this would be a win. I'm like, Bill, I didn't know the offensive line was getting injured in May.
You do wins and losses because it's fun. Like, oh, they're going to beat the Giants. Oh, but they won't beat Cowboys twice. You know they're going to win here.
Right.
It's just fun. Mock drafts, it's the same thing. You do it because it's football, but at the end of the day, you don't nail it like you do.
Yeah.
You just don't.
You know what mock draft I look forward to? The one the day before.
Yeah, there you go.
Because that one.
Mock draft version 97.2.
But I appreciate where Javier Rodriguez is coming from because some of these people are projecting everyone to go with the Eagles, and at some point you're just like, there's no way every one of those scenarios is right.
Right. Like if you look at 7 different mock drafts and they give 7 different answers, well, come on. I mean, which one do you believe in? Which one are you going to get?
Right.
There's so many options here at 6. It's crazy.
It's too many options.
For sure.
He's Hunter Brody. I'm Josh Hennig, filling for Mike Yell here on the Sports Bench. Mike will be back in tomorrow on 97.3 ESPN. I'll be back on game night tomorrow night at 6 p.m. here on 97.3 ESPN. Don't forget Sixers versus Jazz tonight at 9 here on 97.3 ESPN FM, your home for Sixers basketball, Flyers hockey, whenever they come back from their COVID cutoff, and more. Don't forget the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. It's free thanks to First Bank of Sea Isle City. Have a great night.